My name is Edie Usher. I am 29 years old, and last Christmas my dad looked me in the eye and called me an idiot for keeping a gift from my grandmother. The gift was a check for $5 million. He tore his up. My mom tore hers up. My sister dropped hers into the fireplace and filmed the flames. My brother crumpled his under the table like a gum wrapper. I was the only one who folded mine into my purse and said thank you. The next morning, a bank manager locked the door behind us, sat me down, and said 4 words I will never forget. My family spent the rest of that year trying to take back what they had laughed at. And what they did to get it changed everything I thought I knew about my own blood. Before we go on, please like and subscribe, and drop a comment telling me where you are watching from and what time it is. I read every one. Now let me take you back to Christmas Eve, to the last dinner my grandmother ever cooked. My grandmother never locked her front door, not in 47 years, and that December the house smelled the same as it had the first time I visited her when I was 4. Oak wood smoke from the fireplace, banana bread cooling on the butcher block, and something bitter underneath. Something I didn't put a name to until later. I came up the hill in my old Subaru with a paper bag of apples from the tree I'd planted behind my rental, and she met me at the door in her corn-yellow sweater and the apron she'd been wearing since her hip first started to ache. She kissed my forehead the way she always did, with one hand on my jaw, like she was double-checking I was still the same person. "Tell me about your class," she said. She said it every Saturday. She always meant it. We sat at the kitchen table with mismatched teacups, and I told her about Daniel, a 3rd grader who wouldn't speak in group work but could write paragraphs that left me a little shaken. She listened with her whole face. She asked me what I thought Daniel needed. I said patience. She said, "Then give him Saturdays." I told her about the bed I'd bought at the flea market, a spindle frame missing a drawer, and she laughed into her tea and said it was probably haunted by a farmer who would not approve of my reading habits. Her hand shook a little when she set the cup back down. I pretended I didn't see it. We knitted for a while. She was working on something small and gray that she wouldn't show me. I was trying, badly, to finish a scarf I'd started in October. Outside the window, the cardinal she fed came down to the feeder and took 1 seed and left, the way he always did. She watched him like he was somebody she'd been expecting. When I left, she pressed a thick envelope into my hand on the porch. Inside were 2 crisp $10 bills. For gas. She gave me the same envelope every month, and I never cashed it. I kept them in a shoebox under my bed, because what she was giving me wasn't gas money. I didn't know it yet, but that was the 3rd to last Saturday afternoon I would ever have with her. I drove back down the hill whistling. My mother never called me to ask how I was. She called to tell me how she was, and to find out what I had, and to decide if she needed some of it. She caught me on the drive home, 10 miles out of town, the turn signal ticking like a small metronome inside my dashboard. "Edie, honey, are you up visiting the old lady again?" That was what my mother called my father's mother. Never Grandma. Never Sylvia. The old lady. "I go on Saturdays, Mom." "Every Saturday?" She sighed, the way she sighed when she wanted me to feel unreasonable. "She's fine, sweetheart. She has her pension." My older brother Grant was there with her. I could hear him chewing something. "Edie, I need a ride to Dan's garage Monday. Truck's out again." "I have class Monday, Grant." "So? Afternoon then." My sister Holland texted while I was still on the phone. She lived an hour away in a bigger town with a husband she posted about and rarely mentioned otherwise. "Hey babe, can you float me $200 just this week? I'll hit you back, promise." 3 emojis. My mother kept talking over the silence. "Christmas dinner. Your father wants roast. Make sure she doesn't cook for hours this year, Edie. She gets so tired and then she sits there looking at us." Nobody asked if my grandmother was feeling well. Nobody asked if her hip was worse. Nobody asked why her hand might be shaking when she poured the tea. I realized I had been waiting, quietly, on the off chance that any of them might. And I made a small decision on a snow-wet county road that I did not explain to myself until much later. "I'll see you Christmas Eve," I said. "And Edie," my mother's voice dropped into the tone she used for advice, "don't let her rope you into moving in. She has her pride, but she'll take advantage of yours." I clicked off. My father hadn't even been on the line, but I could hear him anyway, the way you can hear a clock in a house you grew up in. He'd been telling me for years not to let his mother dupe me. He used words like dupe. I had never once in my life seen my grandmother try to dupe a single soul. The first thing my grandmother asked me to promise her was not to save her life. It was to keep her secret. She told me on a Saturday at the end of October, in her garden, while we were cutting back rosemary for the winter. The light was low and orange, the kind of light you only get in a garden that's been planted by the same hands for 40 years. She set her shears down on the bench and sat down heavier than usual. "You remember Dr. Priya?" she said. "Dr. Okafor, of course." "I went to see her Tuesday." I waited. I'd learned long ago that my grandmother told you things in her own time, and trying to rush her was like trying to rush a tomato. "Pancreatic," she said. "Stage 4. I've known since July." The bench felt like it tilted. I didn't cry. I don't know why. I think some part of me had known for months, the way you know a season is ending before you see a single leaf fall. "Chemo?" I asked. She shook her head. "No, I'd like to spend what I have here, in this garden, at the kitchen table, with Meg on Wednesdays, not on a drip." "Grandma." "I am 82, Edie. I have had a very long, very interesting life." She took my hand. Her fingers were cold but steady. "I am not sad. I am sorting." She pinched off a sprig of rosemary and pressed it into my palm. The smell of it has not left me since. "I have one thing to ask you," she said. "Don't tell them." "Grandma." "I want Christmas to be Christmas. I do not want it to be a deathbed. I do not want your father writing his eulogy at the table." She half smiled. "I want roast chicken and bad wine. I want one more year of pretending he is the man I raised." She got a glint then, the old one, the one that meant she was about to say something that would leave a mark. "Besides," she said, "I have a few things to give out first. It's going to be a very interesting Christmas." I didn't sleep that night. 5 days later was Thanksgiving. A month later was Christmas. And nothing she said was ever accidental. Every member of my family walked into my grandmother's house that Christmas Eve with a shopping list in their head disguised as affection. My father came in first, stomping snow off his boots like a man claiming a room. Richard Usher had the kind of posture that had served him for 30 years at the machine parts plant and would, in 3 months, not be enough to keep him employed. He hung his coat on the good hook. He opened the fridge without asking. My mother came in behind him, already complimenting things. "Oh, the tree is darling this year." She was appraising the tree. I watched her eyes move across the garlands and the silver star my grandfather had soldered in 1974, and I could see her counting. Grant brought his girlfriend, who looked 18 and wasn't, and he barely said hello to our grandmother. He did say hello to me. "Still teaching those kids, huh? When are you going to get a real job?" He grinned like it was a joke. It wasn't a joke, but it wasn't entirely cruel either, which was worse. Holland arrived last, phone already up, filming a video for her followers. "Cozy grandma vibes, my loves. You have to see this fireplace." She did not hug my grandmother. She kissed the air near her cheek and went back to her angles. My grandmother moved slowly from the stove to the table in her corn-yellow sweater. She did not say much. She watched her family with the calm, attentive look I had seen her wear for 30 years of family gatherings, the look of a woman who had long ago stopped being surprised. She caught my eye once, and she smiled, and she looked like she was in on a joke with somebody who had not yet arrived. Margaret Yarrow, who had been my grandmother's best friend since 1974 and owned the used bookstore on Elm, stopped by with a jar of honey and stayed for 10 minutes. Before she left, she touched my arm in the hallway. "You are the only one of them she ever talks about," Meg said. "You know that, I hope." Bing Crosby was on the kitchen radio, skipping a beat the way it had skipped since 1997. Nobody fixed it. Nobody ever had. The turkey fat hissed in the pan, and my grandmother pulled a small wooden box from beside her chair and set it on the table where nobody noticed. My grandmother handed out 5 identical envelopes that night, and by the time the roast was cold, 4 of them had been destroyed in front of her. She waited until everyone had eaten. She stood up, slowly, with one hand on the back of her chair, and she cleared her throat in the small, precise way she cleared her throat before a speech. My family kept talking. They always kept talking. "I have something I'd like to give each of you," she said. Grant rolled his eyes at Holland. Holland rolled hers back. Grandma opened the wooden box. She took out 5 envelopes, cream-colored, unsealed, and she walked each one around the table and placed it beside each person. Mine was last. She touched my shoulder when she set it down. My father opened his first, because my father opened everything first. I watched his face go from expectation to confusion to something that tightened like a fist. Inside was a check. It was from First National Hollow Ridge. It was made out in my grandmother's slanted blue ink handwriting. It was for $5 million. Grant laughed before he'd even read his. He leaned over. He saw the number. He laughed harder. "Grandma, is this a joke? You making us play Monopoly?" Holland giggled and held hers up to the light like a piece of costume jewelry. My mother's face did something strange. She looked for a second like a child who had been handed a kindness she didn't know how to hold. Then my father said, loud and flat, "It's fake. Don't be an idiot." He dropped his check onto his plate. Gravy soaked into the corner. My mother tore hers in half, slowly, and set the halves beside her wine glass. "Mother, really, it isn't funny." Grant crumpled his into a ball and flicked it under the table. And Holland. Holland stood up and walked to the fireplace and dropped hers in. The flame caught the paper by the corner, and I watched the number 5 with 6 zeros behind it blacken and curl into a little red shape and disappear. My grandmother did not blink. She looked only at me. I took mine. I folded it in half once and put it in the inside pocket of my purse. "Thank you, Grandma," I said. She nodded. Just once. Nobody else noticed. I drove home that night holding onto the steering wheel the way you hold onto a pew during a funeral hymn, because otherwise, your hands will shake. The snow was coming down heavy by then. The wipers had an uneven rhythm, a right then left offbeat that I had learned over 4 winters to find comforting. I counted it while I drove. I did it the way Daniel in my 3rd grade counted his fingers when he got overwhelmed. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. My grandmother had watched 4 of her grandchildren and her son mock her to her face, and she had not blinked. She had only looked at me. She was not senile. She was the sharpest person I had ever known. She read the Sunday paper front to back and made marginal notes. She beat Meg at bridge every second week and bought her a bar of chocolate on the weeks she didn't. She had once caught an error on my federal tax return from memory, and 2 weeks before Christmas in the garden, she had asked me a question that had seemed, at the time, like one of her odd, quiet questions. "If you had $1 million, Edie, what would you do first?" I had laughed. "I don't know. Get new supplies for my class, probably. We're out of dry erase markers." She had nodded as if I had said the right thing on a test. At home, I put the check on my kitchen table and stood over it under the yellow overhead light. The paper was heavy. The security weave, when I tilted it, moved like oil on water. The routing number matched First National Hollow Ridge, which I had walked past every day of my working life. The signature was my grandmother's. The same signature I had seen on every birthday card since I could read. I turned it over. On the back, in her same blue ink, she had written, in her slanted, unhurried hand, "For the one who still comes on Saturdays." I sat down on the kitchen floor. I sat there for a long time. The check was on the table above me. Outside, the snow did that thing it does at night, where it makes everything muffled and far and close at the same time. In the morning, I would go to the bank. Not to cash it, just to ask. The manager at First National Hollow Ridge had known me since I was 16, and I had never seen his face turn that color. His name was Benedict Strom. He had a mustache he'd kept since before it came back into style, and a small plastic horse on his desk that I had always assumed was from a child who had grown up. He smiled when he saw me come in. He did not smile a minute later. "Mr. Strom, I'm sorry to bother you the day after Christmas." I took out the check. "I just wanted to verify this. My grandmother gave it to me last night and I didn't—" I slid the paper across the desk. He looked at it. His smile hesitated. Then something behind his eyes flicked, and he picked the check up with both hands, and his face did the thing I had only read about in books. It lost color. It went the color of the inside of an envelope. "Edie." He said my name the way a doctor does. "Can you come with me a minute?" He stood up. He walked ahead of me, past the tellers, past the Christmas wreath on the vault, and he opened the door of a small private room with a long table and no windows. He held the door for me. He shut it. He turned the little latch. "Have a seat." "Is it real?" He sat across from me. He folded his hands. He looked at the check, then at me, then at the check. "Edie," he said, "have you read what she wrote on the back?" "Yes." "Okay." He took a breath. "Your grandmother came in the first week of November. She moved funds into a special account. She had 5 of these drafted. I was the one who put them on paper, Edie. They are as real as the chair you're sitting in." I counted backward from 10, the way I tell Daniel to, and I looked at the little plastic horse on the corner of his desk. "Ma'am," Benedict's voice got very professional, "I'm going to ask you to sit down. This is real. All of it is real." He paused. "And this is only part of it. There's a lawyer named Halverson who's going to be in touch with you. I'm not supposed to say more than that." I walked out of the bank with $5 million in my account, and a feeling, already, that it was not going to be the thing that changed my life that week. My grandmother had been a millionaire for longer than I had been alive, and the only person in our family who had ever thought to ask about her financial advisor was the teller who had cashed her Social Security check. I drove straight from the bank to her house, still in my winter coat, still with that smell of photocopier paper and old coffee from Benedict's back room on my sleeves. She was in the kitchen. She had the coffee on. She was not surprised to see me. She had never once, in my 29 years, been surprised to see me. "You went to the bank?" "Yes." "Was Benedict nice to you?" "He was terrified." She smiled into her cup. It was the chipped one with the cardinal on it, the one older than I was. She pushed a second one across the table for me. "Sit, sweetheart." I sat. "Your grandfather left me $400,000 in 1998, she said, "and a house and a garden. I did not know what to do with any of it. I was 55. I had been a music teacher for 30 years. I had never bought a stock in my life. So I went to the library. I read. I wrote letters to a man in Chicago. He had written a column in a magazine I liked. His name was Mr. Smith. He wrote me back. We corresponded for 17 years. I never met him. He died in 2015. She paused. He left me 40% of his firm. Grandma, I have roughly $40 million, Edie, give or take a market day. I set my coffee down. The cardinal on the cup looked at me with one chipped eye. Why didn't you ever? Because nobody ever asked. She said it without any bitterness. She said it like she was stating the weather. Your father asked me once, in 2003, if I needed him to manage my money. I said no. He never asked again. He did not ask because he wanted to help. He asked because he wanted to control. I am not obliged to hand my life over. Not to someone who confuses those two things. She reached across and squeezed my hand. I didn't give them money last night, Edie, she said. I gave them a last chance to ask me why. And they didn't ask. It took exactly 112 minutes for my family to stop calling that check fake and start calling it theirs. Benedict had to make a compliance call. He called my father because my father was listed on an old shared account from 20 years ago. He did not tell my father details. He told him a wire had posted. It was enough. The first call came while I was still in my grandmother's kitchen, then another, then another. My phone, face down on the table, buzzed 32 times in 45 minutes. I counted because I couldn't think of what else to do. Holland's texts came in a flood. I need my check. I changed my mind. It was an accident. Edie, baby. Can we talk? I have to pay my storage unit. You don't need that much. Be fair. Grant's voicemail was louder. You give that back. That's family money, you little weasel. You hear me? My mother cried on her voicemail. She cried the special way she cried, the soft performance cry with a hiccup at the end. Edie, sweetheart, you don't understand what you're doing to this family. I have been so patient. I have never asked you for anything. I looked at my grandmother. She was calm. She was eating a piece of toast. She was watching me with the mild attentiveness of a woman watching a storm she had forecasted. I'm going to turn this off, I said. Good. The knocking started 40 minutes later. My father. I saw his truck pull up through the kitchen window. He came up the walk at that speed he used when he was being reasonable out loud and furious underneath. My grandmother stood up slowly and walked to the front door. She did not open it. She stood in the glass. My father pounded. He tried the handle. Mom, open the door. Richard, she said, through the glass. It is the 26th of December. It is not a good time. You gave her $5 million. I gave each of you $5 million. 4 of you burned it. Mom. Richard. Go home. She did not raise her voice. I'll see you when I see you. She turned the lock for the first time in 47 years. My father stood on the porch for a long time. Then he left. My grandmother came back to the table. She picked up her toast. Well, she said, that's begun. The week my grandmother broke her hip was the week I stopped pretending I was going to get to keep her. It happened in the yard on a Tuesday in mid-January. She went out to scatter seed for the cardinal. She slipped on a patch of ice she could not see through the snow. She lay there for 40 minutes before Meg, driving past on her way to the bookstore, noticed her front door standing half open and stopped. The hospital wanted to admit her. She wanted hospice at home. Hospice at home is what she got. She had written the paperwork for it 3 months earlier and Halverson had notarized it. I asked for a leave of absence from Briar Hollow Elementary. The principal, a quiet woman named Mrs. Osgood, looked at me a long moment across her desk and said, You take whatever time you need, Edie. You come back when you come back. I moved into my grandmother's spare bedroom, the one with the pressed flowers on the wall and the quilt her mother had made. I set up a baby monitor on her nightstand. Theo, the gym teacher, who was a good man and nothing more, drove my things over in his pickup and did not ask me a single intrusive question. My father visited once. He stayed 20 minutes. He told my grandmother she should let Grant bring her home. She said, Richard, I am home. He did not come back. Each night I read to her. She liked Willa Cather, especially my Antonia, which had been a wedding present from her mother. I read slowly. She closed her eyes. Sometimes she corrected my pronunciation of a prairie town name. Sometimes she slept. The honey lemon water on her nightstand would freeze at the edge overnight because the radiator was old and the walls were paper thin, and every morning when I changed it, I would notice, with a small frightened tenderness, that my hand was smaller than hers had been and would never be that big. We had both shrunk, in our own ways, that winter. On a Thursday near the end, she asked me to open the top drawer of her dresser. Inside was a brass key on a leather loop. She put it in my hand. "When Halverson calls you," she said, "give this to him. He will know what it opens." "Grandma." "Not yet, Edie, but soon, and that's all right." My grandmother died the way she had lived, on her own terms, without making a fuss, and in a room that smelled like old books and wool. It was February 3rd, 2026, a Tuesday, 5:47 in the morning. I know because I looked at the small travel clock she kept on the nightstand. It was the kind of clock with a ticking second hand, a clock that a teacher's husband had given her for their honeymoon in 1962, and it kept bad time, and she had never replaced it. She had been quiet for 2 days. The morning before, she had squeezed my hand and said, "Edie, I am so proud of you." She had not said a word since. I had been dozing in the chair. I woke because the furnace in the basement clicked off. It clicked off, and the house got very, very still, and I understood, in a way I did not understand with my mind, that she had gone. Her hand was in mine. It was still warm. I did not cry right away. I sat for a while. I listened to the morning. The radiator knocked once. The cardinal came to the feeder. He took one seed. He flew away. Then I called Meg. She was there within the hour. She sat beside the bed and held the other hand. She had been holding that hand since 1974. I called my father next. He picked up on the fourth ring. I told him. He was quiet for a moment, and then his voice cracked, and I thought, for a second, that he was human after all. Then my mother came on the line, and her first words were, "When is the funeral going to be, Edie? I have a thing on the 10th. I hung up. The funeral was that Saturday. My grandmother had left written instructions. She wanted her corn-yellow sweater. She wanted to be buried beside her husband in the small cemetery behind the Lutheran church that she had never once attended. She wanted no eulogy from Richard. She wanted Meg to read a poem. They all came. They cried loudly. My father wore a black suit that did not fit him anymore. My mother clung to his arm. Holland filmed the procession from behind her sunglasses. I saw her post it later, with a filter that softened the edges. The caption said, "Healing." I did not film anything. I did not cry until that night. I want to stop for a second, right here. If you've walked this far with me, if you've ever lost someone who loved you more than you ever thought you deserved, give this story a like, and in the comments below, tell me their name. I read every single one. I'm asking because the part that comes next is the part I wasn't sure I had the strength to tell, and having you here makes it easier. Stay with me. Let's go back. My father called the lawyer before the gravediggers had finished their coffee. Halverson told me later, because Halverson tells you things in his own time, and because he was, among other things, funny. He said my father had left 3 voicemails by noon on the day of the funeral. All of them asked when the will would be read. Grant came to my house the next evening. He walked in without knocking, because we had grown up in a house where nobody knocked, and he sat on the edge of my couch in his funeral suit and asked me, without preamble, "Do you know who she left the house to?" "No, Grant." "You were there every week," she must have said. "We didn't talk about it." "Come on, Edie." "We talked about my kids at school. We talked about her garden. We talked about bridge. I don't know what's in her will, and I don't care what's in her will." He looked at me for a long moment, the way Grant looks at people when he's trying to figure out if they're lying. Grant has never been a good reader of people. He took a beer out of my fridge without asking, and left. Halverson called me the following Monday. He was exactly as I remembered from the one time I had met him at my grandmother's table, a tall, slow man in a gray suit with a voice like a cello string. Miss Usher, your grandmother retained me for many years. There will be a reading of her will at my office, February 20th, 10 in the morning. All immediate family is named. I would like you to be there. All right. Edie. He paused. There is a safe deposit box here in my office that she arranged for. I will ask you at that reading if you have a key. I have it. Good. Mr. Halverson, can I ask you a question? You may. Did she tell you what's in the will? He was quiet for a long time. She did. Yes. Is it going to surprise anyone? He laughed once, a dry laugh. Miss Usher, it will surprise every single person in that room except you and me. And even you, I think. A little. The day of the will reading was Friday. I put on a gray dress. I drove into town with an assumption that was entirely wrong. My father used the exact same words when he heard the will that he had used when he tore up the check. He said, "Is this a joke?" And then he said it again, a little louder, as if the room had not heard. Halverson's conference room had a wood-paneled clock on the wall, and that clock ticked louder than any clock I had ever heard in my life. My father sat on one side of the table. My mother sat next to him with her hand on his sleeve. Grant sat across. Holland sat at the end, scrolling, until Halverson asked her to put the phone in her purse. Meg sat beside me. I had asked her to come. My grandmother had asked her to come. Halverson opened a dark green folder. He put on his reading glasses. He did not look at any of us. This is the last will and testament of Sylvia Marigold Usher, dated April 14th, 2022. Witnessed by Margaret Yarrow and Dr. Priya Okafor. Notarized in my presence. He read the preamble. He read the list of specific bequests. The cardinal teacup to me, the bridge set to Meg, the soldered star to the Lutheran church, the piano to the elementary school. My father's jaw was already set. The principal remainder of the estate, Halverson read, comprising the family residence at 114 Linden Hollow Road, the surrounding 23 acres, all investment accounts, all remaining personal effects, valued at approximately $40.2 million, net of the 5 gifts already distributed. The clock was very loud. The testator leaves the entirety of this remainder to her granddaughter, Edie Rosemary Usher. Nobody spoke. The clock ticked. My father's face did not change for a full 3 seconds. Then he stood up. Is this a joke? Mr. Usher, please sit down. Is this a joke? It is not a joke. It is a legal document. Please sit down. My mother let out a small sound, a sound like a teacup set down too hard. Grant's eyes were on me. Holland had pulled her phone back out. Halverson read the attached reason clause in the same steady voice. I leave this to my granddaughter Edie. She is the only one who visited me on Saturdays. She came for no reason other than love. She cared for me at the end of my life. She never once asked what I had. My father sat down. He stared at the table. Meg, beside me, took my hand under the table. I held on. The lawsuit arrived in the mail 4 days after the will was read, and I knew before I opened it which of them had been the one to type it first. It was a heavy manila envelope. I smelled the paper. I don't know why. Stress does strange things. The paper smelled like paper, and the lawyer's office it had come from smelled like toner and old leather, and both of those smells came through. The complaint was filed on behalf of Richard Usher, Linda Usher, Grant Usher, and Holland Usher Briggs. The cause of action was undue influence. They were alleging that I had manipulated an elderly, ailing woman into leaving me her entire estate. I sat on the floor of my kitchen and laughed. It was not a good laugh. It was the laugh you make when the only alternative is to throw something. I called Halverson. He had been expecting it. I will represent you, Miss Usher, free of charge. I owe your grandmother 3 decades of her trust. Let me finish what she started. I called Theo next. Theo was in his driveway scraping ice off his car, and he picked up on speaker. Should I try to settle, Theo? Just give them something? He was quiet for a second. I could hear the scrape of the ice. Edie, he said, you didn't do anything wrong, and your grandma knew exactly what she was doing. Giving in would be the only way to disrespect her. Okay. That was the whole call. That's the kind of friend Theo was. My father sent an email the next morning. Subject line, family meeting. Text. Edie, we need to sit down. This has gone too far. Dad. I forwarded it to Halverson. Halverson replied on my behalf, polite, professional, referring all communication to his office. Holland began posting veiled videos. She sat in her car, no makeup, and talked for 7 minutes about a family betrayal she could not get into for legal reasons. Her followers rallied. Stay strong, Queen. Family is everything. I'm so sorry, babe. I watched 2 of them. I did not watch the third. My grandmother had been in the ground for 18 days. The case would not be heard until October, Halverson said. Probate moved slow. Contested probate moved slower. I would have to live, for 7.5 months, with my family's names on a lawsuit with mine on it. I went back to work on Monday. Daniel was happy to see me. The safe my grandmother had given me the key to did not contain stocks or deeds. It contained proof that she had been paying attention. Halverson drove out to the house with me on a Saturday in May. The lilacs were starting. He walked through the rooms with the quiet respect of a man who had known the woman who had lived in them. The safe was in the back of her bedroom closet, behind a row of cardigans. He watched as I turned the brass key. Inside were 3 things. The first was a thick legal folder. The will, the notarizations, the 3 capacity evaluations Dr. Okafor had performed over the years, every one of them clean, every one of them dated, every one of them signed. Halverson smiled a small, grim smile. Your grandmother, he said, understood litigation. The second was a bundle of letters. Every birthday card I had ever sent her, beginning with a crayon drawing from when I was 4. She had kept them all. She had labeled them by year in small pencil on the backs. The third was a leather album. I did not know what it was at first. It was green, soft-cornered, bound with a shoelace she had replaced at least once. I opened it on the floor of her bedroom. It was a journal, a kind of journal. On each page, in her slanted hand, was a single entry, a date, a few words. Sometimes a pressed leaf or a feather or a ticket stub. February 5th, 2015. Edie came. We read about the Nebraska prairie. She cried a little at the part with the plow. October 22nd, 2016. Edie came. Brought apples. Helped with the roof gutter. August 19th, 2018. Edie came. Tired from her first week of teaching. We both napped. Every Saturday I had come, every single one, going back a decade, going back further than I had realized I had been coming, 487 entries. I counted them later, sitting on the bed. On page 112 there was a tea stain, faint, brown. Her note underneath said, Edie brought pie. I spilled. Much laughter. I cried for the first time since the funeral. I cried into my own sleeve on her bedroom floor, while Halverson stood in the hallway and pretended, kindly, to be looking at the view. I was not alone in the courtroom. She had counted every Saturday. The judge who ruled on my grandmother's will had gone to high school with her in 1962, and she said that twice before the hearing began. Her name was Judge Bernadette Ames, and she recused herself, routinely, from cases where the relationship was closer than passing acquaintance. She and my grandmother had been classmates in a graduating class of 51. That was acquaintance. She could hear the case. She announced it in open court, and my family's lawyer did not object, because he knew, I think, that he had nothing better to wait for. Halverson was calm. He walked the judge through the will, the medical evaluations, the witness affidavits. Dr. Priya Okafor took the stand in a navy suit and spoke with the clean, bored precision of a woman who had testified before. She had evaluated my grandmother 3 times. Once in 2022 at the time of the will signing, once in 2023 as a follow-up, once in 2024, because my grandmother had insisted. All 3 evaluations concluded full testamentary capacity. The third had been performed 11 weeks before she died. Meg took the stand next. Meg wore her reading glasses and a small silver pin Sylvia had given her for her 50th birthday. Your Honor, Sylvia Usher and I played bridge every Wednesday for 40 years. In her last week, she remembered the hand I misplayed in September of 1987. She still teased me about it. Meg looked at my father when she said the next part. She was not influenced by anyone. She was the most unpersuadable person I have ever known. Then the family lawyer cross-examined me. I had been dreading it. I had rehearsed. I did not need to have rehearsed. Miss Usher, did you ever suggest to your grandmother how she should allocate her estate? No. Did you discuss her finances with her? No. I didn't know she had any to speak of. Did you ever encourage her to favor you? No, sir. Then why, in your opinion, did she leave you everything? I had not been prepared for that question. I thought for a moment. I looked at Meg. I looked at the empty seat beside her that nobody had sat in. I came because it was Saturday, Your Honor, I said. That was the whole reason. The judge wrote something on her pad. I could not read it. She looked up. The court finds the will valid as executed. The contest is dismissed. Plaintiffs to bear defendants' reasonable attorney's fees. Halverson squeezed my shoulder once. I did not look at my father. My father called me his worst daughter in front of a local journalist, and by Tuesday, the Hollow Ridge Chronicle had printed the phrase in a pull quote. It happened in the marble hallway outside courtroom 3. I was walking with Halverson toward the stairs. My father came out of the restroom on the opposite wall, and he saw me, and something he had been holding for 9 months let go. You are the worst daughter I have ever had, Edie. His voice bounced. Marble is unkind to anger. 3 people turned their heads, including a young woman with a notepad and a press badge from the Chronicle. She did not look away. She made a small, deliberate note. I did not respond. I kept walking. Halverson, beside me, put a hand on my elbow and steered me gently past. Grant followed. Don't you feel guilty? He said, behind me, not quite shouting. Not even a little? I stopped. I turned. Grant had been my older brother for 34 years. He had pushed me into a pool when I was 6. He had helped me move 3 times. He had borrowed money and never returned it. He had come over for Thanksgiving without calling. He had stood at my grandmother's coffin with dry eyes. No, Grant, I said. Not even a little. Holland had been live streaming from inside the courtroom. The bailiff had asked her to put the phone away twice. She had ignored him. Her video was pulled by the platform within an hour for violating broadcast and court policies. She lost, according to a comment she made later, 7,000 followers in a single afternoon. She had crossed the line from aggrieved cousin to embarrassing spectacle in front of an audience that had been paying her. I drove home that afternoon and sat in the cold kitchen and drank tea. Theo came by with dinner he did not pretend to have cooked. We ate in silence. The Chronicle piece ran on Tuesday morning. The headline was measured. Probate court upholds contested will in Usher estate. The body was factual, but there was a pull quote. My father's words, verbatim, set in a box on the second page. And there was a small detail I did not notice at first, in the closing paragraph. Mr. Usher was laid off from his position at a regional parts manufacturer earlier this year. The manufacturer announced closure in March. It was not a vindictive detail. It was a reporter doing her job. But it ran in a town that read every word. A small town has a long memory, especially for people who burn money in front of the dying. My mother's spa had a grand opening banner that had been there for 2 years, faded pink, hanging slightly off the corner of the awning. It started losing clients in the 3rd week of November. Not all at once. A Tuesday regular stopped booking, a Friday regular. The woman who owned the flower shop across the street, who had been friendly with my grandmother in the choir, walked past the spa for 3 weeks without looking in. My mother called me in December and cried and asked if I could help. I said no, gently, and she hung up. Grant's construction office, the one he had been running out of a rented corner of a warehouse, was repossessed in late January. He had been 3 months behind on rent. The landlord, who had gone to school with my father, had been patient. The local paper ran the filing in the back section, the way it ran all the filings. People read the back section. My father did not find another job. He put in for work at 3 places. He did not get a single callback. He was 58, and he had spent 30 years at one manufacturer, and he was, in the job market, a species that had been declared extinct. My mother moved back in with her sister in Ohio in November. My father stayed in the house I had grown up in. He did not invite anyone over. And then there was Holland. The story the Chronicle had printed had been picked up, briefly, modestly, by a regional human interest blog, which had led to a follow-up comment thread, which had led to a message a woman in Akron sent to Holland's husband Marcus about certain credit card balances belonging to a certain wife that seemed inconsistent with the household income. Marcus, who had been suspecting something for a year, checked. He found $80,000 of debt Holland had been hiding. He filed for divorce in April. Holland moved in with my mother in Ohio by the end of May. She had lost, by then, about 12,000 followers and any leverage she had ever mistakenly imagined she had with our father. Theo and I were at his kitchen table when I read the text from Meg telling me about the divorce. Theo looked at me. I looked at him. "You didn't do this," he said. "I know." We sat with it anyway. The thing about my grandmother that nobody in our family ever bothered to learn was that she had been quietly feeding their children's school for 40 years. I found out on a warm Saturday in May, going through her desk. I had decided not to sell the house. I couldn't. I had told Meg, who had been running her bookstore out of a cramped storefront on Elm, that she could use the front 2 rooms for a second location. She had cried and then agreed, and then brought over boxes. We were clearing drawers together when I found the notebook. It was small, soft leather, bound with an old brown shoelace. It slipped out from behind the drawer liner in the bottom right of her desk, the kind of hiding place you use when you do not want to be caught being kind. I opened it. Every page was a year. Each year had a line. 1985. Milk program, $840. 1986. Milk, $900. Textbooks, $1,200. 1987. Milk, $950. Library, $400. It went on for 40 years. The last entry was November of 2025. Milk, books. A new set of drums for the music classroom. The running total at the bottom, in her steady hand, was $284,600. Briar Hollow Elementary. My school. The school I taught at. The school where Daniel, my 3rd grader who would not speak in group work, drank a small carton of milk at every lunch because it was part of what the school called the nutrition program, which was fully funded each year by a private, anonymous donor nobody had ever met. I sat down on the floor of her kitchen, and I put the notebook in my lap, and I did not move for an hour. A pressed leaf fell out of the back cover, an oak leaf. She had written, under it, Benji's first day, October 1984. I did not know who Benji was. I asked Meg later. Meg looked at me a long moment and said, "Your father. He was a kindergartner." My grandmother had begun feeding the school the year after her son started there. She had fed it straight through his childhood, his adolescence, his graduation, his marriage, his children, his grandchildren. She had fed the school that fed us. She had never told a single one of us, including the one who spent her own days teaching inside it, who she had kept in dry erase markers for a decade without knowing. My mother sat at my kitchen table in February and looked, for the first time in my life, like someone who was not performing. She had come without calling. She had gotten on a bus from Ohio. She had walked the last mile from the station, through slush, in a coat that had been expensive 6 years ago, and was now a coat. She knocked on my door the way a stranger knocks. Twice. Soft. I let her in. I made tea. I did not say very much. She had lost weight. Not the way she used to diet, which was loud and announced. She had lost weight the way grief loses weight for you. Her hands shook on the cup. I read her letter, Edie. Okay. The one Mr. Halverson gave me after the reading. I didn't open it until last month. I couldn't. Okay. She tried to drink and set the cup down because she was crying. Silently. The new way. She said she remembered a specific Tuesday in 1994. Before you were born. She had come over and I had been short with her. She said she had understood. Her own mother-in-law had been difficult with her. She didn't want to pass that down. And she said, I forgive you, Linda. I have forgiven you for 30 years. My mother put her head on her arms on my kitchen table. I let her cry. I did not pat her shoulder. I did not say it was okay. I just made another pot of tea. When she looked up, her makeup was gone, and her face looked like it had before I was born. And I was, for a second, looking at a version of my mother I had never met. Edie, I would never ask. But the spa, 100,000. I could save it. I would pay it back. I would. I looked at her. I did not feel angry. I felt, honestly, nothing sharp. Just a kind of tired tenderness. Mom, I said, I'm not giving you money. She nodded. She had expected me to say it. But I'm going to set up a fund, I said. In her name. For college. For any grandchild I have someday. And for any child in Hollow Ridge who needs it. That's what I'll do with her money. That's what she would have wanted. She nodded again. She stood up. She hugged me. Small, for 1 second. Then she left. I'm not angry anymore, Mom, I said at the door. I just don't know you. She did not turn around, but she nodded. I gave notice at Briar Hollow Elementary on a Tuesday, and by Friday I had rented a small cottage in a town in Maine I had never set foot in. Mrs. Osgood did not try to talk me out of it. She had known me for 4 years. She had watched me come back from leave. She had watched me go through a trial. She had watched me keep teaching a class of 9-year-olds as if the ground were not shifting under my feet every morning. She accepted my resignation with a small, dry nod and said, You will be a good teacher wherever you go, Edie. You already are. I set up the foundation with Halverson. $20 million. The Sylvia Usher Scholarship Fund. It would cover tuition, books, and milk for any student who needed it, from elementary to college, in Hollow Ridge County. Halverson wept quietly in his office when I signed the papers, the only time I ever saw him weep. He had loved her. I had always known. I did not sell the house. I could not. I deeded the right to use it to Meg, for her lifetime, for the bookstore. She named the new branch Sylvia's Second Reading. She painted the sign herself. I applied for a 4th-grade position at an elementary school in Newbury Cove, Maine. It was a town I had picked out of a road atlas because the name sounded like something my grandmother would have liked. I did not visit first. I did a phone interview. They offered me the job 2 days later, for $51,200 a year, which was the salary I had always had and the salary I intended to keep having. My father called once in June. I let it go to voicemail. He left a message asking if we could meet, just the two of us, just for coffee. He said he had things he wanted to say. I listened to the voicemail 3 times. Then I wrote him a single email. Dad, I am not going to stop loving the people you should have been, but I cannot keep writing the letter for you. Take care of yourself. Edie. I did not send any of the versions where I tried to explain further. I did not send the version where I forgave him. I could not lie to him, even now. I packed what fit in my car. It fit in my car. The first cup of coffee I drank in Maine was the worst cup of coffee I had ever had, and I laughed out loud in the parking lot. I had driven 2 days, through New Hampshire, through the edge of Vermont, through the long, slow rise into Maine. The Subaru had a cough in 4th gear that I had been pretending was not worsening for 3 years. I had the corn yellow sweater in the front seat beside me, folded, because I had not been able to pack it in a box. I stopped at a roadside gas station somewhere south of Augusta. They had coffee in a pot that looked like it had been there since the Carter administration. I bought a cup. I drank it. It was, objectively, a disgrace. I stood in the parking lot and laughed. A real laugh, the kind I had not made in a year, and I startled a man putting air in his tire. I got to Newberry Cove in the late afternoon. The town was small, the way small towns are small. 1 main street, a post office, 2 diners, a feed store that had become a yarn store, a bakery that was closed on Tuesdays. The cottage I had rented sat on a bluff a half-mile out. Gray clapboard, weathered, porch with 2 rocking chairs, one of them missing a spindle. The landlord had left the key under the flower pot, as promised. I unlocked the door. I stood in the hall. The cottage smelled of cedar and of the sea. It was empty. It was quiet. The kitchen had a cast-iron stove I did not know how to use yet. The living room had 1 window that faced the Atlantic and a small, uneven floor that creaked when I crossed it. I walked the corn-yellow sweater into the living room. I draped it on the arm of the 1 chair that was already there, a green wingback left by the last tenant. The sleeve hung over the arm the way it used to hang over the arm of my grandmother's kitchen chair. I stood and looked at it for a long time. In the mailbox when I checked that evening was a single envelope. Meg's handwriting. Inside was a card and a letter. The letter was brief. Edie, Sylvia knew you would end up somewhere like this. She told me 10 years ago. She said, Edie is a coastal soul. It just hasn't told her yet. Welcome home. Meg. By the next June, I had a 4th grade classroom that faced the Atlantic, and a yellow cat who believed my grandmother's sweater belonged to him. The classroom was on the 2nd floor of the Newberry Cove Elementary School, a brick building from 1936 with floors that squeaked in 8 specific places, all of which my students learned to skip over on the way to the pencil sharpener. My class had 18 students. One of them was a quiet girl named Rosie who did not speak in group work. I gave her patience. I gave her Saturdays in the form of extra 20-minute conversations after school on Tuesdays. She started, by May, to raise her hand. The first awards of the Sylvia Usher Scholarship Fund went out in April. 47 students. I read every application. 2 of them were children from the Briar Hollow Milk Program my grandmother had been paying for since before they were born. I cried quietly over both files. I signed both approvals. Meg drove up in early June with a mason jar of jam from the garden. She stayed 3 days. She sat on my porch and read a paperback, and did not talk more than was required. She was 80 years old. She looked, on my porch, like a woman who had decided to live to 100 out of spite. Richard sent me a birthday card on the 14th of July. It was the first birthday card he had sent me in 10 years. The card was generic. Happy birthday, daughter. On the inside, in his cramped handwriting, he had written 4 words. I hope you're well. I did not write back. I did not tear it up either. I put it in a drawer in the kitchen. I do not know why. I think I will know. Someday. The cat arrived in late June, skinny and yellow, with a torn ear and a steady, skeptical way of looking at a person. He walked in through the screen door I had not properly latched. He got onto the corn-yellow sweater on the wingback chair. He went to sleep. I did not have the heart to move him. I named him Cather. He slept on the sweater every night. Every morning I had to ask his permission to borrow it. He would look at me with a single half-open yellow eye, as if he had inherited the memory directly and was only tolerating my use of it on loan. On a Saturday in August, I sat on a porch that belonged to me and wrote a letter that didn't need to be mailed. The sun was going down over the bay. It was going down 10 minutes later than it had gone down behind my grandmother's hill. I had been keeping track of that, for some reason. I had sat through all 10 minutes of it that night, the way you sit through the credits of a film you don't want to end. The letter was to her. I told her about the classroom, about Rosie, about the 8 squeaky floorboards, about the day the principal brought donuts, about Cather, and the sweater, and the way he looked at me. I told her I had figured something out. I had not won because I had money. I had money now, and most of it was not mine, and never would be. I had won because I had known, when it mattered, how to sit still with a person who was leaving, because I had come on Saturdays for no reason, because I had put the check in my purse instead of the fire, because when she had asked me, sitting in her garden in October, what I would do with $1 million, I had said I would buy dry erase markers for my class, and she had looked at me the way a person looks at an answer they have been waiting their whole life to hear. I folded the letter. I put it in the small wooden box she had kept by her chair on Christmas Eve, the one I had brought with me to Maine. I closed the lid. I stood up. Cather, through the open window, looked at me with the patient disdain of a creature who was ready for his dinner. "Coming," I said. I went inside. If this story has reached you, if anywhere in your life there has been someone who loved you more than you knew how to receive it, please tell me in the comments below. Tell me their name and what they taught you about quiet kindness. I read everyone, and I carry them with me. If you would like to hear another story about boundaries, inheritance, and the women who choose to walk instead of stay, the next one is waiting for you in the description, and it begins with another check. Come with me. My name is Darcy Ingram. I was 32 years old when my father threw my 8-year-old daughter into a thunderstorm. 3 hours. That's how long my daughter sat in a storm drain before someone found her. 3 hours of rain hitting her face, of wind tearing through her jacket, of thunder shaking the concrete under her body. She was 8. She weighed 52 pounds, and my father opened the door and pushed her out like she was a stray dog who'd knocked over the trash. He did it because of a lie told by her 10-year-old cousin, a lie my parents never questioned, not for 1 second, because questioning it would have meant admitting the truth about who they'd been protecting all along. What happened in that hospital room 3 hours later, and what my father said when he saw me sitting by her bed, changed everything. But what none of them knew was that I had already made the call that would end their world as they knew it. Welcome back to Calm Drama Stories. This is where we share real stories about the moments that test your family and the quiet strength it takes to protect the people you love most. If this story speaks to you, drop a comment and be sure to subscribe. I joined the Army at 18, not because I loved the idea of uniforms and salutes, because it was the only door my father couldn't close. Ray Ingram had a very clear picture of what his daughters should be. Married young, close to home, grateful for everything he provided and quiet about everything he didn't. My sister Jenna fit that picture perfectly. She married Derek Walsh at 21, had Tyler at 22, and moved into a house 10 minutes from my parents. My father smiled at her wedding like he'd just won the lottery. I chose ROTC, then Officer Candidate School, then a logistics commission out of Fort Campbell, Kentucky. Every step I took further from home, my father's silence got louder. By the time I was 24, I was a first lieutenant managing supply chains for a brigade. By the time I was 25, I was pregnant. The father, a civilian contractor named Marcus, left when I was 6 months along. No forwarding address, no phone call. Just an empty apartment and a note that said, "I'm not ready." I had Lily alone, raised her on base housing and meal plans and every scrap of leave I could scrape together. My mother called once a week. My father called once a month. And when they did, the question was always the same. "When are you coming home, Darcy?" I never answered that question the way they wanted, but I always answered Lily's. "Where are we going next, Mommy?" "Wherever the Army sends us, baby. And we'll make it work." I was good at making things work. I was not good at seeing what was happening when I wasn't there to watch. When I got orders for a 9-month rotation in Kuwait, I had 72 hours to finalize my family care plan. Every military parent knows that form. It's Department of Defense standard. You designate a caregiver. You sign custody paperwork. You leave your child with someone you trust and you fly halfway around the world hoping you made the right choice. My parents volunteered before I asked. My mother called the morning after I told her about the deployment. "She's our granddaughter. Of course we'll take her." I remember feeling relieved. Lily would be in a house with a yard, a school district rated 8 out of 10, and 2 grandparents who had raised 2 kids of their own. The alternative was my Army buddy's wife, a woman Lily had met twice. The choice felt obvious. I signed the family care plan designating Ray and Connie Ingram as Lily's temporary legal guardians. I set up an automatic transfer of $1,200 a month into their checking account. Childcare, groceries, school supplies. My father never mentioned the money. Not once. And I later found out he never told Jenna either. Jenna's son Tyler was already practically living at my parents' house. He had a bedroom there, a toothbrush in the bathroom, a drawer full of clothes. When Lily arrived with her suitcase, my mother put her in the guest room, the one with the pull-out couch and no curtains. Tyler had a room with baseball posters and a nightlight shaped like a rocket. Lily had a couch that folded. I didn't know that then. Lily didn't tell me. And when I asked my mother if Lily was settled, she said, "She's adjusting just fine." That was the first lie. It wouldn't be the last. The night before I deployed, I sat on Lily's bed in our base housing apartment and pulled a small card from my pocket. Military dependent ID, her photo on the front. My name printed underneath. Emergency contact number on the back. I clipped it to the inside pocket of her backpack. "What's that for?" she asked. "This tells anyone who finds you that you belong to me. No matter where I am. No matter how far. You show someone this card and they will call your mom." She ran her fingers over the plastic. "Even if you're in another country?" "Even then." She was quiet for a moment. Then she said something that should have stopped me cold. "What if Grandpa gets mad again?" "Again?" I set down the water bottle I was packing and looked at her. "What do you mean again?" She picked at the edge of her blanket. "Nothing. He just gets loud sometimes." "Loud how?" "Like when Tyler breaks something and Grandpa thinks I did it. He yells, but then Grandma says it's fine." I knelt in front of her. "Has Grandpa ever scared you?" She shrugged. 8-year-old shrug. The kind that means yes but doesn't have the vocabulary for it yet. I filed it away. Told myself I'd watch more carefully from overseas. Told myself I'd ask my mother about it. Told myself that my father was strict, not dangerous, and that Lily was safe. I was wrong about one of those things. And by the time I figured out which one, my daughter was in a storm drain 4 blocks from my parents' house. I kissed her forehead. "I'll call you every week, I promise." Promise. I kept that promise. My parents didn't keep theirs. Kuwait was hot, flat, and 18 hours ahead of Tennessee. My workdays ran 12 to 14 hours managing supply routes for 3 forward operating bases. I scheduled my video calls for 6 in the morning local time, noon back home, because that was Lily's lunch break at school. Except the calls never happened at school. My mother insisted on hosting them from the kitchen. "Better Wi-Fi," she said. But the real reason became clear after the second week. Connie was always in the frame, hovering behind Lily, adjusting the camera angle, smiling. How's school, baby? Fine. What did you do today? Stuff. Are you and Tyler getting along? Pause. I don't know. She used to talk for 20 minutes straight. About the caterpillar she found. About the girl in her class who could burp the alphabet. About the bird that landed on the playground fence. Now she gave me single-word answers and looked past the camera like she was waiting for permission to leave. I tried asking my mother directly. Is something going on with Lily? She seems different. Connie waved her hand. She's adjusting. All kids do this when their routine changes. She just needs time. Can I talk to her alone next time? Without you in the room? The Wi-Fi is better in the kitchen, Darcy. You know that. I didn't push it. I should have. 2 weeks later, I noticed something else. Lily stopped mentioning Tyler by name. Used to be, Tyler and I played in the yard, or Tyler showed me his baseball cards. Now it was just silence when I asked. You and Tyler doing okay? She looked down. Yeah. You sure? Can I go now, Mom? Grandma says lunch is ready. I let her go. I shouldn't have. The care package arrived on a Tuesday. Brown cardboard box, stamped slightly crooked. My mother's handwriting on the label. Inside, 2 bags of Lily's favorite gummy bears, a photo of Lily at a school event, and a folded piece of construction paper. I opened the drawing. Stick figures. Left side of the page. A tall man, a woman with curly hair, a smaller woman holding hands with a boy. All grouped together, smiling. Bright crayon colors. Red, yellow, blue. Right side. 1 figure. Small. No smile. Brown hair. Standing alone. No one touching her. At the bottom, in careful child handwriting, my family. I sat on my bunk and stared at it for a long time. My daughter drew herself outside her own family. I called home immediately. My father answered. His voice carried that edge it always had when I called during his evening shows. Is Lily there? She's upstairs. What do you want? I got a drawing from her. She drew the family and she put herself off to the side. Alone. Silence. Then a grunt. Kids draw nonsense, Darcy. Don't read into everything. She drew everyone else holding hands. She drew herself standing by herself. She's fine. Your mother takes good care of her. Maybe if you were here instead of playing soldier across the ocean, your daughter wouldn't draw sad pictures. He hung up. I pulled out a small notebook I kept in my footlocker, the kind with the hard green cover and the elastic band. I wrote the date. I wrote what he said. I wrote what the drawing showed. Then I folded the drawing and slipped it into the breast pocket of my uniform. It stayed there for 4 months, against my chest, against my heart. I started paying attention to the details I'd been missing. Small things, things that added up. Lily's school had an online portal, parent access. I could see attendance records, teacher notes, after-school pickup logs. I checked every morning before my shift. Tyler Walsh, picked up by Ray Ingram every day at 3:15. Car pickup lane, like clockwork. Lily Ingram, enrolled in after-school program, pick up at 5:30. Different parent listed for emergency contact. My mother, not my father. He didn't even put his name on her file. I called the school office. The receptionist was kind. Lily's doing well academically. She's quiet though. Very quiet. Does someone pick her up? She's in the extended day program. Her grandmother picks her up around 5:30, sometimes closer to 6. Tyler left at 3:15. Lily waited 2 more hours. Every day. Tyler's birthday in October. I saw photos on Jenna's social media. 15 kids. Bounce house in the backyard. Cake shaped like a baseball diamond. My parents grinning behind a table of presents they'd paid for. Lily's birthday in January. My mother texted me a single photo. Lily at the kitchen table. A store-bought cake. No candles. No friends. Just my mother standing behind her and a paper plate with a slice of yellow cake. I called my mother that night. Why was Lily's birthday so different from Tyler's? We already spent a lot this month, Darcy, and Lily didn't want a big party. She's 8. What 8-year-old doesn't want a party? Tyler lives here full-time. Lily is temporary. Temporary. She used that word like it was a fact, not a knife, but it cut just the same. And I knew right then that in my parents' house, my daughter was a guest. Tyler was the grandchild. I sat down at the comm station at 0300 and typed a hardship reassignment request. 2 pages. Single-spaced. Facts only. Military regulation allows early return when family care plan conditions change materially. I cited documented concerns about my designated caregiver's treatment of my dependent child. I attached the school counselor's contact information, the pickup log discrepancy, and a scanned copy of Lily's drawing. My commander, Colonel Barrett, read it the next day. He called me into his office, sat me down, and said, "Ingram, is your daughter safe?" "I don't know, sir." And that's the problem. He signed the request that afternoon and sent it up the chain. Then I called Captain Elena Rivera, JAG. We'd served together at Fort Sill 3 years earlier. She was stationed at Campbell, and she owed me a favor for covering her supply audit when her kid got sick. "Rivera, I need legal advice, off the record for now. Talk to me. My parents are my designated caregivers for Lily. I think there's favoritism, maybe neglect. I need to know my options." She didn't hesitate. "Document everything, screenshots, school reports, dates. If this goes legal, you want a paper trail that starts before the incident, not after. There hasn't been an incident. Then you're ahead of the curve. Stay there." I spent the next 2 months building a file. Every phone call logged, every drawing scanned, every text from my mother saved to a folder on my laptop labeled Family. I didn't tell my parents I was seeking early return. I didn't tell Jenna. I didn't tell anyone except Rivera and Colonel Barrett. 2 months of paperwork. 2 months of waiting. And then, 3 weeks before my reassignment came through, Tyler told the lie that changed everything. I trusted my parents with the most important person in my life, and for 2 years, I missed the signs that my daughter was becoming invisible in her own family. If you have ever felt that gut feeling that something was wrong but could not prove it, stay with me. Drop a comment, and let us keep going. Tyler Walsh had been lying about Lily for months. I just didn't have the full picture until later. The first lie was small. A broken television remote. Tyler threw it at the wall during a tantrum over a video game. When Ray stormed into the living room, Tyler pointed at Lily. She dropped it. Lily said she didn't. Ray told her to stop making excuses and sent her to her room. The second lie was about cookies. My mother baked a batch of snickerdoodles for Tyler's classroom party. Half the tray disappeared overnight. Tyler told Connie that Lily ate them after dinner. The truth was, Tyler had given them to his friend from across the street. My mother never asked Lily her side. She just said, "You need to learn some self-control." The third lie was worse. Tyler told his teacher that Lily had called him a name at recess. The teacher separated them for a week. When the school counselor looked into it, no witnesses could confirm Tyler's story. But the separation had already happened, and Lily spent that week eating lunch alone. Each time, the same pattern. Tyler spoke. Adults believed. Lily denied. Adults dismissed. My mother once told Lily, "Don't be a tattletale. Nobody likes a child who makes up stories." Lily stopped telling anyone anything. She drew instead. I learned about most of this from the school counselor, Mrs. Patterson, who had been meeting with Lily once a week since November. Lily trusted her because Patterson never interrupted her drawings. She just sat and waited. Patterson told me later, "Your daughter doesn't talk much, but her drawings say everything." Ray's rule was simple and absolute. Tyler didn't lie, and anyone who said otherwise was the problem. My mother had a pearl necklace that she treated like it was made of moonlight. It belonged to her mother, and before that, her grandmother. 3 generations of Ingram women had worn it at their weddings, their christenings, their milestone birthdays. My mother kept it in a small velvet box on her dresser and took it out every Sunday before church. One Sunday in February, during a family dinner I wasn't present for, my mother lifted the velvet box from the dresser and brought it to the table. She opened it in front of Tyler. "This was your great-grandmother's," she said. "Someday, when you're older, I'll pass it down to you." Tyler's eyes went wide. He reached for it and Connie let him hold it. She watched him turn the pearls over in his small fingers and she smiled like she was watching a sacred tradition unfold. Lily, sitting across the table, asked quietly, "Can I hold it too?" My mother didn't look at her. "Not right now, sweetheart. You might drop it." Tyler smirked. Lily put her hands in her lap. Jenna, sitting beside Tyler, leaned toward my mother and said just loud enough for Lily to hear, "You know Lily's clumsy. Remember the vase?" The vase. A ceramic vase Tyler had knocked off the shelf while roughhousing. He told my parents Lily bumped it. They believed him. My mother spent the rest of that evening reminding Lily to be more careful with other people's things. After dinner, Lily went to the guest room. She sat at her desk and drew. She didn't come out until my mother called her for her bath. Nobody checked on her. Nobody asked what she was drawing. Nobody noticed she had gone quiet again. Mrs. Patterson called me on a Saturday morning, 5 in the afternoon her time. I was eating dinner in the mess hall when my personal phone buzzed with a Tennessee number I didn't recognize. "Lieutenant Ingram, this is Gail Patterson. I'm the counselor at Millbridge Elementary. I work with Lily." I stepped outside. The wind was hot and smelled like diesel. "Is she okay?" "Physically, yes. But I wanted to talk to you about some patterns I've been seeing." She told me Lily had been increasingly withdrawn since January. She no longer played with other children at recess. She sat in the corner of the cafeteria and drew. She flinched when adults raised their voices near her. Then Patterson told me something that made me grip the railing so hard my knuckles turned white. She told me her grandfather says she's not a real Ingram. I closed my eyes. The heat pressed against my face. He said that. Those were her exact words. She said he told her that real Ingrams don't steal and don't lie. Not a real Ingram. My father said that to me the day I told him I was enlisting. He stood in the kitchen of the house I grew up in and said, "Real Ingrams stay with their family. You're walking out on everything." Now he was saying it to my daughter, 8 years old, 52 pounds. And he was telling her she didn't belong. Patterson continued, "I'm not required to file a formal report yet, but I wanted you to be aware." "Thank you. Can you email me your session notes?" "I can send them to your military email by Monday." I hung up, forwarded the voicemail to Rivera, and added 3 lines to the green notebook. My father had learned nothing, and my daughter was learning all the wrong things. I called Jenna the next day. I told myself it would be a sister-to-sister conversation. Calm, honest. 2 mothers talking about what was best for the kids. It lasted 4 minutes. "Is Lily doing okay at Mom and Dad's? Her school counselor says she's been withdrawn." Jenna sighed. The kind of sigh that was loud enough to make sure I heard it. "She's fine, Darcy. She just needs to learn her place. Tyler's been here longer. He knows the routine." She needs to learn her place. I let those words sit in my ear for a full 3 seconds before I trusted myself to respond. "What does that mean, Jen? Learn her place?" "It means your daughter walks around that house like she's a guest instead of pitching in. Tyler helps Dad in the garage. Tyler sets the table without being asked. Lily sits in her room and draws. She's 8. Tyler was doing chores at 8. Tyler has 2 parents and a bedroom with a nightlight. Lily has a pull-out couch." Silence. Then Jenna said the thing I wasn't prepared for. "I told Mom and Dad that maybe you should just let them adopt Lily. You're never here anyway. She needs stability, Darcy. She needs a real family environment." My throat tightened. Not from sadness, from the effort of keeping my voice even. Adopt my daughter. I'm just saying what everyone's thinking. I hung up without another word. Opened my laptop, pulled up the Army Legal Assistance portal. Started drafting notes for a formal custody review. My sister wanted my parents to adopt my child. She'd said it out loud like it was a reasonable suggestion, like my motherhood was a lease she thought had expired. I decided that night that when I came home, I was coming home armed, not with weapons, with paperwork. 3 weeks later, the reassignment came through. I was going home. Colonel Barrett handed me the paperwork in his office with a look that was half relief and half concern. "Ingram, whatever's going on, Handle it. Your kid needs you more than logistics does. I packed my footlocker in 40 minutes. Green notebook, laptop, phone charger, Lily's drawing in my breast pocket. Everything else was Army issue and could stay. My flight left Kuwait at 0600. 17 hours of turbulence and layovers. I landed at Nashville International at 2 in the afternoon, Central Time. Rented a car at the Hertz counter with my military ID. Drove to a Holiday Inn 12 minutes from my parents' house. I did not call them. I did not drive by their house. I sat on the hotel bed with my phone in my hand and called Rivera. I'm stateside, landed 2 hours ago. Good. Your family care plan revocation request is drafted. I can file it first thing Monday morning. What happens after you file? Your parents lose designated caregiver status. Legal guardianship reverts to you immediately. If they refuse to return Lily, we go to family court. And if something happens before Monday, then we file emergency. But Darcy, let the process work. If you confront them now, they'll play victim. Your father will say you're unstable. Your mother will cry. Your sister will tell everyone you abandoned your daughter and now you're attacking the people who stepped up. She was right. I knew she was right. Don't tell anyone you're back. Go to the school first. Talk to the counselor. Build your case in daylight. I was coming home. But this time, I wasn't coming home as their daughter. I was coming home as Lily's mother. And there was a difference between those two things that my parents were about to learn. I drove to Millbridge Elementary the next morning, 9:15 on a Thursday. The parking lot smelled like wet mulch and bus exhaust. Mrs. Patterson was waiting for me. She had a folder, manila, thick. My daughter's name written on the tab in blue ink. Thank you for meeting me, I said. I've been hoping you'd come. She opened the folder on her desk. 6 months of Lily's drawings, arranged by date. The first one, from September. Lily and Tyler at a table. Tyler big, Lily smaller. Both smiling. Normal. Fine. October. Family grouped together. Lily drawn slightly to the left. Still smiling, but a gap had appeared between her figure and the others. November. Lily's figure smaller, the other figures taller. No one holding her hand. December. Grandpa's face. A large circle. Red crayon. Mouth wide open. Tiny figure at the bottom. Tears drawn as blue dots. January. Tyler's birthday. A boy surrounded by balloons and people and presents. In the bottom right corner, a girl with brown hair sitting alone, an X drawn over her body. February. Just 2 figures. One small with brown hair. One tall, wearing green, holding hands. The caption, in wobbly letters, "What I want." I turned that last drawing over in my hands 3 times. Patterson said quietly, "She drew you in your uniform." I know. She never drew her grandparents after December. She stopped including them. I photographed every drawing, front and back, dates visible. Then I photographed Patterson's session notes. 12 pages of observations, quotes, behavioral flags. I sent the entire file to Rivera. Then I sat in my rental car in the school parking lot and cried. The kind of crying that comes from the chest, not the eyes. The kind where your hands grip the steering wheel because if you let go, you might not stop shaking. 7 months overseas. 7 months of 12-hour shifts and satellite calls, and she's adjusting just fine. Those drawings were going to speak louder than anything I could say in court. That afternoon, I parked across the street from my parents' house. 3:45. School bus due any minute. Tyler came first. My father walked out to meet him at the curb. Ruffled his hair. Took his backpack. Said something I couldn't hear, but that made Tyler laugh. They walked inside together. Door stayed open. 20 minutes later, the second bus came. Lily stepped off. She stood on the sidewalk for a moment, adjusting her backpack straps. Then she walked up the driveway. The front door was closed. She knocked. My 8-year-old daughter knocked on the door of the house she'd been living in for over a year. My mother opened it. No greeting. No smile. Wipe your shoes and pick up your stuff from the hallway. Lily walked inside. The door closed behind her. Through the front window, I could see Tyler on the couch. Snack plate, television, feet up. Lily disappeared upstairs within 30 seconds. I sat in my car with both hands on the wheel and made myself breathe. Then I called Mrs. Calloway. Phyllis Calloway. 70 years old? Lived next door to my parents since before I was born. She taught me how to make lemonade when I was 6. She brought my mother pie every Thanksgiving. Mrs. Calloway, it's Darcy. I'm back from deployment. Darcy? Oh, honey. Oh, honey, I'm glad you called. I need to ask you something about Lily. She was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "That little girl sits on the porch alone every evening after dinner, Darcy, while Tyler plays in the yard with your father. She just sits there. Have you seen anything else? Your father yells at her like she's a stray, Darcy. I hear it through the walls. It's been getting worse since Christmas." I wrote down every word she said. Date, time, details. That evening, I drove to my parents' house. I told myself I was just going to check. Park in the driveway. Maybe knock. Maybe take Lily right then. I pulled in at 7:15. The kitchen light was on. The television flickered in the living room window. Then I heard it. My father's voice. Through the front door. Loud enough to reach the car. "I told you to clean up after dinner. Tyler doesn't have to tell you twice." Lily's voice. Small and careful. "I did clean up, Grandpa. Don't talk back to me. Go upstairs and stay there until you can behave." A pause. The creak of stairs. Then nothing. My hand was on the car door. My fingers wrapped around the handle. Every part of me wanted to walk up those steps, open that door, and carry Lily to the car without saying a single word to my father. But Rivera's voice was louder than my anger. "If you confront them now, they'll play victim. You need the system on your side." I closed my eyes, pulled my hand off the handle. I backed out of the driveway, drove 4 blocks, pulled over. That was the hardest 3-point turn I ever made in my life. I called Rivera from the hotel parking lot. "File the family care plan revocation first thing tomorrow. I want it on record." "Done. I'll have the paperwork submitted by 0900. Rivera, what if something happens before then? Then you call 911 and you call me." In that order. I sat in the hotel room that night and stared at the ceiling. 9 hours until morning. 9 hours until paperwork. 9 hours of trusting that nothing would go wrong. But I didn't have 9 hours, because the storm came that night. Here is what happened in my parents' house that evening. I learned the details later, from Tyler's interview, from Mrs. Calloway, from my mother's own tearful confession. Around 8:30, my mother went upstairs to put on her necklace for the next morning's church outfit. She opened the velvet box on her dresser. Empty. She searched the bedroom, then the bathroom, then the hallway. Then she went downstairs and started pulling open drawers in the kitchen, the living room, the front closet. "Ray, my mother's necklace is gone. I can't find it anywhere." My father stood up from his recliner. "What do you mean, gone? It's not in the box. It's not on the dresser. I've looked everywhere." Tyler was in the living room. He watched the panic build for about 90 seconds. Then he walked to my father. "Grandpa, I saw Lily put something in her backpack earlier, after school. She was being sneaky about it." My father didn't ask a follow-up question. He didn't ask Tyler what exactly he saw, or when exactly it happened. He walked straight to the guest room, grabbed Lily's backpack from the floor, and unzipped it. The pearl necklace was inside. Tyler had placed it there that afternoon while Lily was upstairs doing homework. He'd taken it from the velvet box, walked it to the guest room, and slipped it into the front pocket of her bag. Then he'd zipped it closed and gone back to the television. He was 10 years old. He knew exactly what would happen. My father's face turned a shade of red I'd only seen once before, the day I told him I was joining the army. "Lily, get down here, now." She came down the stairs in her pajamas, bare feet on the hardwood, hands at her sides. She had no idea what was coming. The storm had been building since sundown. By 8:45, the rain was sideways. Wind gusts shook the gutters and sent branches scraping across the roof. A March thunderstorm in Tennessee. the kind that turns streets into rivers and knocks out power lines. Inside the house, my father held up the pearl necklace in one hand and Lily's backpack in the other. "You stole this from your grandmother's dresser." "I didn't, Grandpa. I didn't take it. It was in your bag." "I don't know how it got there." He threw the backpack on the floor. 2 years I've put up with this. 2 years of your attitude, your lying, your sneaking around." My mother stood behind him, clutching the necklace against her chest. She said nothing. She didn't defend Lily. She didn't ask questions. Jenna arrived 10 minutes later. My parents had called her. She walked in, saw Lily sitting on the bottom stair, and crossed her arms. "This is what happens when a child doesn't have structure. I've been saying it for months." Tyler stood in the living room doorway. He didn't speak. He picked at his fingernails and watched. My father leaned over Lily. "You have anything to say for yourself?" "I didn't do it, Grandpa." He straightened up, looked at my mother, looked at Jenna, then looked back at Lily. "Tyler said he saw you. Your grandmother is heartbroken, and you're sitting here lying to my face." Thunder cracked outside. The kitchen window rattled. Lily pressed her back against the stair railing. She held her knees to her chest. She didn't cry. She just went very, very still. The kind of still that 8-year-olds learn when the adults around them have become unpredictable. And then my father said the words that put my daughter in the hospital. He stood over her on the stairs, Jenna behind his right shoulder, my mother behind his left. "I've had enough of you." His voice filled the hallway like it owned the walls. 2 years of your behavior, the lying, the attitude, the stealing. "I didn't steal anything, Grandpa." Tyler doesn't lie. It came out of his mouth the way scripture comes out of a preacher. Absolute, final, unquestionable. Tyler doesn't lie. The sun rises in the east, water is wet. And Tyler doesn't lie. My mother touched my father's arm. "Ray, maybe we should—" He pulled his arm away. "No, I'm done. She needs to learn what happens when she disrespects this family." Jenna, from behind. "Dad's right. This has gone on way too far." Tyler, still in the doorway, said nothing. He pressed his back against the frame and picked at the skin around his thumbnail. A nervous habit. The kind a 10-year-old develops when the lie he told is growing bigger than he planned. My father reached down and grabbed Lily's backpack from the floor, shoved it into her lap. "You want to act like you don't belong here? Fine." Lily looked at him. Then she looked past him, at my mother. Connie's eyes were wet, but her mouth was a flat line. She didn't move, didn't reach for Lily, didn't step between them. Then Lily looked at Jenna. Jenna uncrossed her arms long enough to check her phone. My daughter looked at every adult in that hallway, and not a single one of them looked back. My father walked to the front door. The sound of rain filled the house the second he turned the handle. Wind pushed the door open wider than he meant it to. He didn't close it. He just pointed. "Get out. I don't need a lying granddaughter." Those words left his mouth at 8:53 on a Thursday evening in March. The rain was falling so hard it bounced off the porch steps. The wind had already knocked a branch off the maple tree in the front yard. The temperature had dropped 14 degrees in the last 2 hours. Lily stood up from the stairs. She didn't argue. She didn't scream. She picked up her backpack, slipped her arms through the straps, and walked to the door. She was wearing pajamas, cotton pants with little stars on them, a long-sleeved shirt that said "Future Scientist." No shoes, no jacket, no phone. She stepped through the doorway and the rain hit her immediately. Within seconds, her hair was flat against her face. My father slammed the door behind her. Next door, Mrs. Calloway was rinsing her dinner plate when she heard the slam. She looked through her kitchen window and saw a small figure walking down the sidewalk. In the rain, in pajamas, bare feet slapping wet concrete. She picked up her phone. 911. "There's a child walking alone outside in this storm. She just came out of the house next door." Inside my parents' house, my mother sat down at the kitchen table. She held the pearl necklace in both hands and stared at it. "Ray, maybe we should let her back in. She'll catch a cold. She'll come back when she's ready to apologize." Jenna put on her coat. I need to get home before the roads get bad. Tyler, let's go. Tyler didn't move right away. He stood in the doorway looking at the closed front door. He stayed there for about 5 seconds. Then he followed his mother to the garage. Nobody went after Lily. Nobody checked the porch. Nobody looked out the window. My daughter walked 4 blocks in a thunderstorm before she found a storm drain large enough to crawl into. She sat inside it, hugging her knees, her backpack over her head, until the blue and red lights found her. The police officer who found her was named Gutierrez, patrol unit, responding to Mrs. Calloway's call. He drove the route 3 times before his flashlight caught the glint of a backpack reflector inside a concrete drainage opening 4 blocks from my parents' house. Lily was shaking so hard she couldn't speak. Her feet were bleeding from running barefoot on asphalt. Her lips were blue. She held her backpack against her chest like a shield. Gutierrez wrapped her in a thermal blanket from his trunk and radioed for an ambulance. EMTs arrived in 9 minutes. They transported her to County General. Mild hypothermia, scrapes on both knees and the soles of both feet. Dehydrated, heart rate elevated. Not critical, but not okay. At the hospital, a nurse checked Lily's backpack for identification. Inside the front pocket, tucked into the same slot where Tyler had planted the pearl necklace, she found a small plastic card. Military Dependent ID Lily Ingram. Emergency contact, First Lieutenant Darcy Ingram. The nurse dialed the number at 9:37. I was sitting on my hotel bed 12 minutes away, staring at the ceiling, counting the hours until Rivera could file the revocation paperwork, when my phone rang with a local number. "This is County General Hospital. We have your daughter, Lily Ingram. She was brought in by police about 20 minutes ago." I was in my car before the nurse finished explaining. I drove 11 minutes in the rain. Parked crooked in the emergency lot. Ran through the sliding doors. A nurse pointed me down the hall. Room 4. Lily in a hospital bed. IV drip in her left arm. Monitors beeping. Her hair still damp. Her eyes closed. I sat down beside her. Took her hand. "I'm here. I'm not leaving." Her eyes opened. "Mommy?" "Yeah, baby, I'm right here." In her other hand, crumpled against her palm, was a drawing. 2 stick figures. One small, one in green, holding hands. 20 minutes later, a woman in a gray cardigan and glasses knocked on the open door. Badge on a lanyard. Clipboard under her arm. "I'm Nancy Odom, hospital social worker. Do you have a moment?" I didn't let go of Lily's hand. "Come in." She pulled a chair to the foot of the bed and sat down. Professional. Careful. The kind of careful that meant she'd done this before and knew how it went. "I'm required by law to file a report with Child Protective Services. An 8-year-old was admitted tonight with exposure injuries, and no legal guardian present at the time of incident." "I understand. Can you tell me your relationship to the patient?" "I'm her mother, Darcy Ingram, First Lieutenant, United States Army, currently stationed at Fort Campbell." I handed her my military ID. She copied the information onto her form. "Who was responsible for Lily this evening?" "My parents, Ray and Connie Ingram. They're her designated caregivers under my military family care plan." "Was she sent out of the house?" "I believe so. The neighbor who called 911, her name is Phyllis Calloway. She lives next door. She can confirm what she saw." Nancy wrote for a full minute without looking up. Then she said, "CPS will open an investigation within 24 hours. An investigator will contact the caregivers and conduct interviews." "I understand." She looked at me over her glasses. "Is there anything else you want me to know?" "My daughter has been living with my parents for just over a year. I have documentation of ongoing concerns. School counselor reports, behavioral observations, communication logs. I can provide all of it." "Please do." After she left, I called Rivera. "It's happening. CPS is filing tonight. I'm driving to Campbell now. I'll be there by morning." I didn't make a single accusation. I just answered her questions. The system moved on its own. 1 hour and 12 minutes after I arrived at the hospital, the door to room 4 opened again. My father walked in. He saw Lily first. Small body in a hospital bed. IV tube running to her arm. Monitors blinking green. Her pajamas had been replaced with a hospital gown 2 sizes too big. The color left his face like someone pulled a plug. Then he turned and saw me, sitting in the chair beside the bed, still wearing my army jacket, the one with my name stitched over the left pocket. His hands started shaking, both of them, fingers trembling against his thighs like he was trying to hold something that kept slipping. You can't be here. How did you get here? I've been here for an hour, Dad. You're supposed to be overseas. You're deployed. I came back early. His mouth opened, closed, opened again. Nothing came out. My mother came in behind him. She saw Lily and her hand flew to her mouth. Then she saw me and she started crying instantly. The kind of crying that already had words loaded behind it. If you'd been here, none of this would have happened. I looked at her, held her gaze. I trusted you to be here for her, Mom. My father tried to regain footing. The girl stole your mother's necklace. No, she didn't. Tyler is 10 years old, and we're not going to have this conversation in a hospital room. A nurse appeared in the doorway. I need to ask the visitors to keep their voices down, please. I stood up. Not fast, not aggressive, just stood. Dad, Mom, I think you should leave. CPS will be contacting you tomorrow. My father's face shifted from pale to red in 2 seconds. CPS? You called CPS on your own parents? The hospital did. Because that's what happens when an 8-year-old ends up in the emergency room during a thunderstorm with no guardian. He opened his mouth to argue. I waited. He closed it. They left without another word. My mother's crying echoed down the hallway long after the elevator doors closed. The hospital went quiet after midnight. Fluorescent lights dimmed to a low hum. Shoes squeaked on linoleum. Someone's monitor beeped down the hall in a slow, patient rhythm. I pulled my chair closer to Lily's bed and rested my elbows on the railing. She woke up around 1 a.m. Her eyes opened slowly. She looked at me like she wasn't sure I was real. Am I in trouble? No, baby. You are never in trouble for telling the truth. She was quiet for a while. Then she said, in a voice so small it barely reached the pillow, Tyler put the necklace in my bag. I saw him do it after school. He went into the guest room when he thought I was upstairs, but I was on the stairs. I saw. Why didn't you tell Grandpa? Because Grandpa wouldn't listen. He never listens when it's about Tyler. I smoothed her hair back from her forehead. It was still damp at the roots. I know. And I'm going to make sure the right people listen this time. She closed her eyes. Her breathing slowed. Her grip on my hand loosened but didn't let go. I sat in the dark for a long time after that, listening to the monitors, watching the IV drip count seconds. Then I opened my phone and typed an email to Rivera. Subject line, Evidence Package, CPS Investigation Ingram. I attached the school counselor's session notes, the scanned drawings, Mrs. Calloway's phone number, and a summary of our conversation, the hospital intake form the nurse had given me, my family care plan documentation, every screenshot, every log entry, every line from the green notebook. I had spent 2 years trusting the wrong people with my daughter. That night, sitting in that hospital chair, I started trusting the right ones. 72 hours later, my parents walked into a room they never expected to see. My daughter was in a hospital bed because the people I trusted most threw her into a storm. I did not scream. I did not threaten. I let the system do what it was built to do. If you know what it is like to stay calm when everything inside you wants to break, this next part is for you. Keep watching. Ms. Torres arrived at my parents' house on Monday morning at 9:15. CPS investigator. 14 years on the job. Short hair. No-nonsense posture. A leather portfolio thick with forms. She interviewed Ray and Connie separately. Standard protocol. My father's version. The girl was acting out. I told her to sit on the porch and think about what she'd done. She ran off on her own. My mother's version. Ray was upset. She went outside for some air. I thought she'd come right back in. Torres wrote both statements down. Then she noted the discrepancy. He said he told her to sit on the porch. She said Lily went outside for air. One was an order. The other was a choice. They couldn't both be true. Next, Torres interviewed Mrs. Calloway at her kitchen table. Phyllis had her own notes. She'd been writing things down since November, times and dates and what she heard through the shared wall between the houses. He opened the front door, Mrs. Calloway said. He pushed the child's backpack at her. She was in her pajamas. No shoes. He told her to get out. Torres looked up from her notebook. Those were his exact words? He said, "Get out. I don't need a lying granddaughter." Then he slammed the door. I called 911 within 30 seconds. Torres wrote the quote in block letters. Underlined it. That sentence, cold and short and final, went into the official CPS file. Not as hearsay, not as allegation, as a direct witness statement from a 70-year-old woman with no motive to lie and a clear view from her kitchen window. My father had spent 61 years controlling the narrative inside his house. He didn't know that the walls were thinner than he thought. The child specialist assigned to Tyler's interview was named Dr. Kessler. Young, patient, trained in forensic interview techniques for minors. Jenna was present in the room, per protocol, but was instructed not to coach or interrupt. Tyler sat across a small table with a cup of juice and a stress ball. Tyler, can you tell me what happened with the necklace? I saw Lily put it in her backpack. What time was that? After school. Where were you when you saw her? In the kitchen. Where was Lily? In the hallway. Can you see the hallway from the kitchen? Tyler paused. I was in the hallway too. Were you in the kitchen or the hallway? He squeezed the stress ball. The living room. I saw her from the living room. 3 locations in 30 seconds. Kessler didn't point it out. She just wrote. Tyler, sometimes kids feel pressure to say things because they're scared or because someone told them to. It's okay to tell the truth here. Nothing bad will happen to you. Tyler looked at his mother. Jenna's face was stone. I put it in her bag. Jenna's voice cut in immediately. He's confused. He doesn't know what he's saying. Kessler. Ma'am, please let Tyler finish. Tyler stared at the stress ball. His voice dropped to a whisper. Mom told me Lily needs to learn her place. She said if Lily got in trouble, Grandpa would send her away and things would go back to normal. Jenna stood up. Tyler didn't look at her. The room went very quiet. Torres conducted Jenna's interview in a separate room. By then, she had Tyler's statement, Mrs. Calloway's account, and the documented history from the school counselor. Mrs. Walsh, did you instruct your son to place the necklace in Lily's backpack? Jenna's jaw tightened. That's ridiculous. Tyler is 10. He makes things up. Your son stated that you told him Lily needs to learn her place. He also stated that you said if Lily got in trouble, your father would send her away. He's a child. You're going to believe a child over me? Torres set her pen down and looked at Jenna without blinking. Ma'am, I believed a child's lie when it put an 8-year-old in the hospital. So yes, I take children's statements seriously. Jenna pushed her chair back. I'm calling my lawyer. That's your right. This investigation will proceed regardless. Torres placed the pearl necklace on the table in a clear evidence bag. It had been recovered from Lily's backpack at the hospital and catalogued by the responding officer. This necklace was planted in an 8-year-old girl's bag by a 10-year-old boy who was told to do so by his mother. The result was a child being expelled from her home during a severe thunderstorm without shoes, without a jacket, and without supervision. She spent 3 hours alone in a storm drain. Jenna stared at the necklace. The pearls caught the overhead light. They looked smaller under fluorescence than they ever did on my mother's dresser. She didn't say another word. She picked up her phone and left the room. The supervised meeting took place at the CPS County office on Wednesday afternoon. A rectangular table. Overhead, fluorescent lights. A recording device in the center. On one side, my parents. My father in a button-down he'd ironed himself. My mother in the cardigan she wore to church. Their lawyer, a man named Lester, sat between them. On the other side, me. Captain Rivera in her dress uniform. My documentation in a manila folder. At the head of the table, Ms. Torres. Jenna was not present. She had refused to attend after Tyler's interview. Torres opened by presenting her findings. Inconsistent statements from Ray and Connie. Tyler's admission. Mrs. Calloway's witness account. School counselor documentation spanning 6 months. Hospital records confirming Lily's injuries. My father tried to interrupt twice. Both times, Lester put a hand on his arm. The third time, my father couldn't hold it. This is a family matter. You're turning a discipline issue into... Torres. Mr. Ingram, an 8-year-old, was hospitalized with hypothermia. This is a child welfare matter. My mother started crying. Quiet tears that ran down the lines in her face. We love Lily. We made a mistake. One mistake. I looked at her across the table, kept my voice level. You said if I'd been here, none of this would have happened, but I trusted you to be here for her. That was my only mistake, and I won't make it again. Rivera opened my folder. Family Care Plan Revocation, already filed. Request for sole custody review, submitted to family court. Documentation of the $1,200 per month my parents had received for childcare. All of it on the record. My father stared at the stack of paperwork. You're going to throw your own family away over this? You threw my daughter into a storm, Dad. I'm building her a roof. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't need to. Torres delivered the preliminary findings at the end of the meeting. Substantiated report of child neglect against Ray and Connie Ingram. Recommendation: no unsupervised access to Lily Ingram pending comprehensive review. All future contact to occur at a monitored visitation facility, bi-weekly, 2-hour sessions. Rivera confirmed. Family care plan officially revoked. Lily's legal guardianship reverted to me. The custody order would be formalized through family court within 30 days. My father stood up. His chair scraped the floor. His hands were shaking again. The same way they had at the hospital. The same tremor that started in his fingers and worked its way to his wrists. Darcy, she's my granddaughter. She is. And that's exactly why this has to happen. My mother reached across the table for my arm. Her fingers brushed my sleeve. I gently pulled my hand away. Not fast. Not angry. Just a boundary. Mom, I love you. But loving someone doesn't mean letting them hurt your child. She pulled her hand back and pressed it against her mouth. Lester stood and gathered his papers. He looked at my parents with the face of a man who knew his clients had no defense. He shook Torres's hand, nodded at Rivera, and guided Ray and Connie toward the door. My father stopped in the doorway. He turned back, opened his mouth. Then he looked at the table where the paperwork sat. The revocation, the custody request, the witness statements, the hospital records, and closed it. He left without saying another word. My mother followed him. The door clicked shut. I walked out of the CPS office into a hallway that smelled like floor cleaner and burnt coffee. Lily was in the lobby. Rivera's paralegal, a young sergeant named Kim, had been reading her a book from the waiting room shelf. Something about a dog who lost his bone. Lily looked up when she heard my footsteps. She slid off the chair and ran to me. Her arms went around my waist. She pressed her face into my jacket. Are we going home? Yes, baby, we're going home. She pulled back and looked up at me. Our home? Our home. I took her hand. Her backpack hung from one shoulder. I could see the edge of the military-dependent ID card still clipped to the inside pocket. The same card I'd put there the night before I deployed. I had put that card on her because I trusted my parents to keep her safe. But when the system failed and the people failed and the storm came, that small piece of plastic with my name on it was what brought her back to me. Not my parents. Not my sister. A laminated card and a nurse who dialed the number on the back. We walked out into the parking lot. The sun was out. First clear day in a week. I didn't look back. 3 months later, Lily and I were living on base at Fort Campbell. Small apartment, 2 bedrooms. Her room had lavender curtains she picked out herself, and a desk where she drew every evening after dinner. I had been reassigned to a desk position, logistics coordination, stateside. No deployments for at least 12 months. My commander signed off without hesitation. Family court had formalized the custody order in April. Sole physical and legal custody to me. My parents were granted supervised visitation, 2 hours every other Saturday, at a monitored facility 20 minutes from their house. A social worker present for every visit. The first visit was in May. My father brought Lily a coloring book. Horses and flowers. He set it on the table between them and sat down in a plastic chair. He didn't know what to say. Lily didn't either. They colored together for 45 minutes. My father asked her about school. She told him about her art class. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't mention Tyler or Jenna or the necklace or the storm. When the 2 hours ended, he stood up and said, "I'll see you in 2 weeks, Lily." She said, "Okay, Grandpa." He walked out to the parking lot and sat in his truck for 10 minutes before driving away. I know because the social worker told me. Jenna had not contacted me since the CPS meeting. Derek, her husband, came back from his oil rig rotation and had to be told the full story. They enrolled Tyler in counseling, per CPS requirement. Tyler sent Lily a handwritten note that arrived in June. "I'm sorry I lied about the necklace. I hope you're not mad." Lily asked me if she had to write back. I said it was her choice. She wrote back 3 days later, "It's okay. I hope you're doing better." My mother called me every Sunday evening. The conversations were short. "How is Lily?" "She's doing well, Mom." "Can I send her something?" "You can send it to our address." "Darcy, the schedule is set, Mom. We'll see you on Saturday." My father's hand still shook when he saw Lily at the visitation center. I didn't know if it was guilt or fear or something he didn't have a name for yet. But he sat in that room for 2 hours every other Saturday, and he never raised his voice. He never said, "lying granddaughter," again. Not once. I used to think protecting my daughter meant making sure she had a roof and food and people around her. I was wrong. Protecting her meant making sure the people around her deserved to be there. And when they didn't, it meant having the courage to be the one who said enough. Not with a scream. Not with revenge. Just with the truth, a stack of paperwork, and a mother who finally came home. That is my story. One storm, one lie, and one mother who came home just in time. If this reminded you that protecting your child is never overreacting, share this with someone who needs to hear it. Thank you for being here. Drop a comment, hit subscribe, and I will see you in the next one. I'm Kinsley Sinclair, and I was 34 the morning my family drove 3 hours to sell a ranch they didn't know I already owned. But this story really starts 9 years before that, on my 25th birthday, with a phone call from my mother. She was telling me they couldn't make it. Again. My whole life, I was the strong one. My sister Sloane was the one who needed them. That birthday, I finally believed it. So I packed a bag and I left for good. What I did the morning of that birthday, and the 8 years I spent rebuilding a half-dead ranch 3 hours from anyone who shared my last name, is the part none of them ever saw coming. Welcome back to Calm Drama Stories, where ordinary people set hard boundaries and quietly come out ahead. If a story like this finds you tonight, you're exactly where you should be. Drop a comment and subscribe so the next one reaches you too. These days, my mornings start at 4:30, in the dark, with frost on the fence rails and 40 horses waiting on me. I run a boarding and training operation out in the eastern hills, 200 acres, a rescue program on the back 40, and a waiting list 11 names deep. People drive past the sign and assume I inherited all of it. I didn't. I built it with 2 hands and a borrowed truck, and a stubbornness that scared most men off. Casey, my apprentice, is 19 and already better with a nervous yearling than I was at 30. She showed up that morning with 2 coffees and a question about a colicky gelding. I checked him, walked him, told her he'd be fine by noon. Then I pulled my grandfather's gloves off the post by the tack room, the cracked brown leather ones, worn soft at the knuckles, and I laced them on like I do every single day. They don't fit me right. I keep them anyway. There's a whole life folded into that leather, and I'll get to it. Because 8 years ago, I had none of this. I had a duffel bag, a quarter tank of gas, and my mother's voice still ringing in my ear. "You're the strong one," she'd said, like it was a gift. I used to think being the strong one meant being loved differently. It took me years to understand it just meant being loved less, and being expected to say thank you. So let me take you back to the kitchen where I learned that, the week of my 25th birthday, before I knew a single thing about deeds or horses or the difference between family and the people who simply show up. Back then, I lived in a rented room across town and worked at a feed and supply store, saving for a vet tech program. My family was 3 exits up the highway in the house I grew up in. My mother, Sharon, ran that house like a triage ward, and Sloan was always the patient. My father, Wade, kept the peace by agreeing with whoever spoke last, which was always Sharon. And Sloan, 2 years younger, had a gift. She could turn any ordinary Tuesday into an emergency that required everyone's hands. A bad date became a breakdown. A parking ticket became a crisis of confidence. I learned the rhythm of it young, the way you learn weather. When the air in that kitchen got heavy, somebody's plans were about to get canceled, and it was never going to be Sloane's. I'd brought it up once, gently, the spring before. "It feels like there's only ever room for one of us," I said. My mother didn't even look up from the stove. "Sloane's more delicate, honey. You know that." I did know that. I'd been told it so many times it felt less like a description and more like a sentence handed down at birth. The strong one. The capable one. The one who'd be fine. Nobody ever asked if I wanted to be fine. They just decided I was, and built the whole house around it. That spring I told myself the next milestone would be different. I'd pay for it myself. I'd plan it small. I'd give them no reason and no excuse. I really believed that would be enough. It's almost funny now, how much I still believed in them that year. Almost. If you want to know exactly what I was up against, picture my college graduation 2 years earlier, associates in animal science, first in my family to finish anything past high school, and I'd worked nights for it. The ceremony was at 10 in the morning. At 9:15, Sloane fainted in the parking lot. Or said she did. By the time the paramedics shrugged and left, my family was gathered around her in the car, and I was walking across that stage alone, scanning a crowd of strangers for faces that weren't there. They made it for the last 10 minutes. My mother took a photo of Sloane recovering and posted it before she took one of me in my cap. I know because I saw it in the family group chat that night. The one labeled Sinclair Fam. The one I was technically a member of and functionally invisible in. 41 messages about Sloane's scare. 2 about my degree. Both thumbs up emojis. I muted it after that. I didn't leave it. I want you to notice that, because it matters later. I stayed in that chat, half listening, the way you keep a hand on a stove to remember it's hot. People always ask why scapegoats don't just walk away sooner. Here's the honest answer. You keep waiting for the one day they finally see you. You're sure it's coming. You've got proof saved up of all the times it almost did. And every almost is a hook in your mouth. By 25, I had a lot of almosts. I had no idea I was 2 weeks from the one that would finally cut the line. So I planned my 25th carefully, like diffusing something. I booked a back room at a steakhouse in town, 8 seats, and I put down a $100 deposit out of my own savings. I didn't ask anyone to pay. I didn't ask anyone to plan. All I asked was that they show up on a Saturday at 7. I drove to the house on a Tuesday to tell them in person, because texting felt too easy to ignore. My mother was at the table with her checkbook and a stack of Sloane's bills. "It's my birthday Saturday," I said. "Just dinner. I've got it handled." She nodded the way you nod at a coworker. My father said it sounded nice. And then, because I'd learned to read that kitchen, I asked the question straight out. "Is anything going on Saturday I should know about?" My mother capped her pen. "We can only show up for one of you at a time, Kinsley. You understand?" I didn't understand. I never had. But I said yes anyway, because saying no had never once changed the outcome and had always cost me more. I drove back to my rented room and told myself the deposit guaranteed something. A reserved table, a confirmed plan, a reason for them to come. I actually slept well that week. I let myself imagine 8 chairs full and a small cake, and my mother, just once, lifting a glass to me. That's the part I'm least proud of. Not the hoping, the certainty. I was so sure the deposit had bought me a fair fight. I should have known by then that the house always changes the rules right before you win. The first text came Thursday. Sloan, in the group chat, all lowercase. Feeling really off lately? Scared. My mother responded in 90 seconds. I'd never once gotten a 90-second response. By Friday afternoon, feeling off had become a full episode, and there was suddenly a new detail. Sloane's boyfriend had proposed, and they wanted to throw an engagement dinner. Saturday. At 7. The exact slot I'd reserved a month before. I want to be clear about what I did, because I've replayed it 1,000 times. I didn't sulk. I called my sister directly. Sloane, I said, that's my birthday dinner time. You know that. There was a pause, and then the smallest, softest voice. I didn't realize. I'm just so anxious, Kins. Can't we combine them? Combine them. My 25th birthday folded into her engagement party like a napkin under a plate. I told her no, calmly, and I called my mother next and laid it out plainly. Same restaurant chains, different night, easy fix. My mother listened, and then she said, the thing that told me Saturday was already lost. Sloane's in a fragile place right now. Can't you be flexible? You're so good at that. Flexible. The strong one's other name. I hung up and sat on the edge of my bed and did the math I'd refused to do for 25 years. I added up every canceled thing, every almost, every 90-second response that was never for me. And for the first time, the total didn't make me sad. It made me very, very calm. Because Saturday wasn't a misunderstanding. It was a pattern with a date on it. And I finally understood that the only way to stop losing the game was to stop sitting at the table. The official call came Saturday at noon, 7 hours before my reservation. My mother's voice was warm and rehearsed. Honey, we're going to do Sloane's engagement thing tonight. We knew you'd be okay with it. We'll celebrate you another time, I promise. Another time. The promise that never has a date. I stood in my little kitchen with the phone against my ear and watched a square of afternoon light crawl across the floor, and I asked the only thing left to ask. Why is it always me, Mom? And she said it. Not cruelly. That's the part people never believe. She said it gently, like she was explaining something obvious to a slow child. You're the strong one, Kinsley. Sloane's the one who needs us. There it was, the whole architecture of my childhood in 11 words. I didn't cry. I didn't argue. I said okay, and I meant a different okay than she heard. I called the steakhouse and canceled my own table and let them keep the deposit. Then I pulled my duffel bag from the closet and started putting things in it. Slowly. The way you pack, when you already know you're not coming back. 2 pairs of jeans. My work boots. The little cash box from under my bed. I didn't have a plan. Exactly. I had a direction. 3 hours east, past the last gas station, there was a man who had never once canceled on me in 25 years, even when it would have been easier to. My grandfather Earl. My mother's own father, the one she'd quietly written off as a stubborn old failure on a dying piece of land. I got in my car at 4 o'clock with the tank a quarter full and my whole life in the back seat. And I drove toward the only person who'd ever shown up. It was a long drive, and somewhere around the second hour the shaking started. Not from sadness, but from something letting go. I called Earl from a gas station outside the county line. He picked up on the second ring, which is its own kind of love when you're used to 90-second waits that never come. Grandpa, it's Kinsley. Can I come stay a while? No questions, no why, just, doors unlocked. There's stew on the stove. I hung up and stood in the cold under the gas station lights and let myself feel, for the first time, how tired I was of auditioning. I'd spent 25 years trying to be valuable enough to keep. And the one person who'd never made me audition lived on a ranch my own mother was ashamed of. I pulled into Earl's place a little after midnight. The headlights swept across a sagging barn, a fence missing half its rails, and a porch light he'd left on for me. He was sitting on the steps in a flannel coat, 71 years old, with a thermos and an extra mug. He didn't hug me. He just patted the step beside him and said, "Rough birthday?" And something in the plainness of it broke me open clean. I sat down. I told him everything. The deposit, the engagement, the 11 words. He listened the whole way through without interrupting once, which was its own miracle. When I finished, he was quiet for a long moment, looking out at the dark shapes of his horses. Then he said something I didn't understand for years. "Sharon learned the wrong lesson a long time ago," he said. "But the land doesn't care who your mother loves. Land only cares who works it." I had no idea yet that he was already telling me everything. I woke the next morning to the smell of coffee and the sound of a man who'd been up for 3 hours pretending he hadn't. Earl's ranch was worse than it looked at midnight. 80 acres he could no longer work alone, 6 aging horses, a barn with a bad roof, and fences a strong wind could have finished. He'd been running it into the ground out of pure pride, refusing to sell, refusing to ask Sharon for help. She'd have charged him interest on anyway. Over eggs, he laid it out like a business proposition, not charity, which is the only reason I could accept it. "I've got land and no body," he said. "You've got a body and no land. Seems simple." Then he stood, walked to a hook by the door and tossed me a pair of work gloves. Cracked brown leather, soft at the knuckles, 2 sizes too big. "These were my father's," he said. "They'll fit when you've earned them." I thought it was a figure of speech. I pulled them on and went out to fix a fence I didn't know how to fix, and I cut my hands raw inside that old leather by noon. That first week nearly broke me. I'd never built anything in my life that wasn't a savings account. But there's a thing that happens when you work land. It doesn't lie to you. A post you set right stays standing. A horse you feed comes back to the gate. For the first time, effort and reward lined up in a straight line, with no mother in between to redirect the credit. I called no one. I didn't tell my family where I'd gone. And in the silence of all those unsent texts, I started, very slowly, to hear my own thoughts for the first time. June showed up in March, in a stock trailer that smelled like neglect. A neighbor had found her standing in a foreclosed lot, a bay mare so starved you could have hung a hat on her hip bones, ribs like a xylophone, eyes flat and gone. Nobody wanted her. The vet quoted a number to bring her back and said honestly it might not take. Earl looked at me. I looked at the mare. "We can't afford her," I said. "We can't afford to leave her either," he answered and walked off to get the halter. I named her June because that's the month I figured she'd either turn the corner or she wouldn't. I learned more about patience from that mare than from any human in my life. You can't rush a starved horse back. Feed her too much too fast and you'll kill her with kindness, her body too wrecked to handle the very thing she needs. So you go slow. Small meals, 6 times a day, for months. You earn an ounce of trust at a time. I'd sit in her stall after dark, not touching her, just being there, the way Earl had patted the step beside him. And somewhere in those nights I understood that I'd been the mare for 25 years, starved at a full table. Told I wasn't hungry, because I'd learned not to ask. June flinched every time I raised my hand, even to scratch her neck, and I knew that flinch from the inside. The first morning she walked to the gate to meet me instead of waiting in the corner, I sat down in the mud and cried like the day was ending. It wasn't. It was the first real morning of the rest of my life. I just didn't have the words for that yet. Here's the flaw I brought with me, the one no childhood beats out of you for free. I could not, for the life of me, accept help. I'd been the strong one so long that needing anything felt like handing someone a weapon. So I worked. I worked until my hands split and my back seized and I fell asleep in my boots. When a neighbor offered to bring his tractor for the south field, I told him I had it. I didn't have it. I had blisters and a shovel, and a point to prove to people who weren't watching. Earl caught on fast. One evening he found me trying to right a fence post alone in the dark, soaked through, shaking. He didn't help me. He just leaned on the rail and watched until I gave up. "You think being strong means doing it alone," he said. "That's not strength, Kinsley. That's just the same cage with nicer scenery." I told him I was fine. The strong one's two favorite words. He shook his head slow. "Your mother told you that you don't need anybody, and now you're proving her right out of spite. Who's that for?" I didn't have an answer. I went to bed angry, which is usually the sound of someone being right about you. The next morning, I called the neighbor and asked about the tractor. It cost me something to dial, more than the work would have cost my body. But the field got done in a day, and the man stayed for coffee. And I learned that letting someone in didn't drain the well. It filled it. Sharon had built me to run on empty and call it independence. Out here, slowly, I was learning the difference between standing on my own and standing entirely alone. They are not the same thing. Nobody ever told me that. If you've ever been called the strong one until it became an excuse to leave you out, you already know exactly how heavy that duffel bag felt going into my car. Stay with me. The part that changed everything is coming. And if this is hitting home, hit subscribe so the ending finds you too. Because by the end of that first year, things started to turn. Our first boarding client was a woman named Dell, who kept a retired barrel horse and paid on time and told two friends. Then those friends told friends. I'd grown up watching my mother ration love like it was a scarce resource, and out here I discovered the opposite was true of good work. Do it once, do it right, and it multiplies. June was rideable by fall, glossy and round, the flat gone out of her eyes. People who'd seen her come off that trailer started bringing me their hard cases, the biters and the bolters and the ones the trainer down the road gave up on. I was good at them. Of course I was. I'd spent my whole life studying how a creature learns to expect the worst, and how, sometimes, with enough slow proof, it learns to expect something better. Earl started introducing me around town as my granddaughter who runs the place, and the first time he said it, I had to turn and pretend to check a latch so he wouldn't see my face. Runs the place. Not visits. Not helps. Runs. I was 26. My hands were ruined. I was bone-tired most nights, and I was happier than I'd ever been in my mother's house. The horses didn't care if I was delicate. The fence didn't care if I was the favorite. Out here, for the first time, I got exactly what I earned. No more, and no less. And it turned out that was all I'd ever wanted. The first call from home came 18 months after I left. Not to find me. To use me. My mother's number lit up my phone one Sunday while I was worming yearlings, and I almost let it ring out. I answered because 18 months is long enough for hope to grow back like a weed. "Kinsley," she said, warm as a salesman, "we've missed you." Then, in the next breath, before I could even respond to that, the ask. Sloane was behind on a car payment. The wedding had fallen through, the fiancé gone, and she was struggling. And could I maybe send something to help my sister get back on her feet? I stood in the barn aisle holding a tube of dewormer, and I waited for the old pull, the one that used to make me empty my account for people who'd never empty a chair for me. It didn't come. Something had healed over while I wasn't looking. "How did you get my number?" I asked, because I'd changed it. A pause. "Sloane found you online. The ranch has a website now." So that's what we were. Not a daughter they'd lost, a line item they'd located. I told my mother I wasn't able to help, which was a lie I felt no guilt about, and I asked her not to call again about money. She got sharp then. Fast. The warmth gone. "After everything this family did for you," she started, and I hung up before she could finish a sentence I'd heard 10,000 times. I went back to my yearlings, but I noticed something cold settle in afterward, a question I couldn't shake. They knew where I was now. They knew the ranch was real. And my mother had asked, very casually, right before the money, how Grandpa Earl was doing these days. The text from my cousin Maddie came on a Tuesday in early spring, 2 years and some months after I'd left. Maddie was the only one in the family who'd ever treated me like a person, and she sent 3 words first. "You should see this." Then a screenshot. It was from the Sinclair fam group chat, the one I was still technically in, but had been quietly removed from a week before without a single goodbye. They'd made a second chat. One without me. And Maddie, bless her, had been added to it by mistake. I sat down on a hay bale and read it twice to make sure I understood. My mother had written, "When Dad passes, the land's worth real money now that someone fixed it up. We split it 3 ways and sell. Kinsley can keep a horse or two if she's reasonable about it. A horse or two, if I'm reasonable." After 2 years of dawn-to-dark labor that had turned 80 dead acres into something worth selling, my own family had already divided the proceeds in a chat they'd built specifically to keep me out of. Sloane had replied with a heart emoji. My father had written, "Sounds fair." Sounds fair. I read those 2 words a dozen times. I want to tell you I raged. I didn't. I'd done my raging in installments over 27 years and I was all out. What I felt instead was a strange, clarifying cold, the same calm that had settled in on my birthday. They weren't going to change. I'd known that. But now I knew something sharper. They were already counting money built on my back, and they were so sure of it they'd written it down. I screenshotted Maddie's screenshot, saved it, and went to find my grandfather. I found Earl in the tack room, oiling a bridle, and I showed him the screenshot because I'd stopped hiding things from him a long time ago. He read it slow. His jaw worked. Then he set the bridle down and looked at me with an expression I'd never seen on him. Something between grief and grim humor. "Well," he said, "that's my daughter, all right." He didn't defend her. That's a thing I'll always be grateful for. He just took it in, the full weight of it, and let it be true. Then he said something that landed soft and didn't fully register. "They're planning to sell what they think is mine," he said. "Let 'em plan." I asked what he meant. He just patted my shoulder and said, "One day this place should be yours, Kinsley. You're the only one who ever bled for it." I brushed it off. People say things like that. Sentimental things, by lamplight, that don't survive daybreak. I'd learned not to bank on words from anyone with the last name Sinclair, and Earl, for all his goodness, was still a Sinclair. So I filed it under kindness and went back to work. What I did do was decide something for myself. I was done waiting to be chosen, and I was done bracing to be discarded. If the land was going to come to me, fine. If it wasn't, also fine. Either way, I was going to build it so high and so good that no 3-way split could ever erase what I'd made. That night, I drew up a real business plan at the kitchen table, the first one of my life. Boarding, training, a rescue arm, lessons. I gave myself 5 years. I beat it in 3. The next 3 years are the part nobody posts about, because hard work doesn't make good photos. I took out a small operating loan in my own name, terrifying and freeing in equal measure, and I poured it into a new barn roof and a covered arena. I got my certifications, one weekend course at a time, until the wall by my desk had more letters after my name than my mother ever believed I'd earn. The boarding stalls filled. The waiting list started. I hired a part-time hand, then a full-time one. And June, my throwaway mare, the one nobody wanted off that trailer, turned out to carry bloodlines worth more than the truck I'd driven therein. Her first foal sold for $11,000 to a show barn 2 states over. I kept the second. I framed the bill of sale and hung it next to my certifications, not for the money, but for the proof. The unwanted one had become the cornerstone. I knew the feeling. Somewhere in year 5 after leaving, I stopped checking whether I was happy and just noticed, one ordinary evening, leaning on the arena rail with a cup of coffee, that I already was. I'd built a life so full it had no empty chair for anyone to refuse to fill. I had Casey, who'd come to me at 17 with nowhere else to go and stayed. I had Dell and the boarders who'd become friends. I had a vet named Tom Reyes who started finding reasons to stop by between calls, and who looked at me like I was something rare instead of something durable. And I had Earl, slower now, mostly supervising from a folding chair in the shade, but still there every morning, still calling me the woman who runs the place. I thought we had years left like that. I was wrong about the timeline, the way you always are with the people you assume will outlast the work. The first sign came on a cold morning in the 7th year, when Earl couldn't get up from his chair. It was his heart. The doctors used careful words, but the gist was plain. He'd had a quiet event, the kind that's a warning the first time and a sentence the second. He came home from the hospital on a Thursday, smaller in the chair than he'd been on Monday, and I rearranged my whole operation to be close to the house. What I didn't expect was how fast the news traveled. 3 days after Earl came home, my mother called. Not me, at first. She called the hospital, then the neighbors, then finally me, fishing for details under a thin coat of concern. "We just want to be there for Dad," she said. We. The same we that hadn't driven 3 hours in 7 years. Suddenly the family that had written "Sounds Fair" about selling his land couldn't wait to visit his bedside. I'm not naive. I knew what the visit was about, and it wasn't about Earl's heart. It was about Earl's estate. A dying man on valuable land is a different proposition than a stubborn old failure, and my mother had always known the price of everything. I told her she could come. I want you to understand why. It wasn't weakness. It was that Earl, propped up in his chair, had heard me on the phone, and he'd said one quiet thing. "Let them come, Kinsley. Let them show their whole hand. It's easier to deal with people once you've seen all their cards." So I set a date. I made up the guest rooms, and I stood at the kitchen window the morning they were due, watching the long gravel drive, my grandfather's gloves on my hands, and I felt the old childhood bracing creep back into my shoulders. Then I made myself stop. This wasn't their house anymore. It was mine to host in, and I'd learned, finally, the difference. They drove up in my mother's spotless sedan, the 3 of them, and the first thing Sharon did when she stepped out was look at the land instead of the house where her father lay sick. I watched her do the math. The new arena, the full barn, the trucks and trailers with the ranch logo on the doors. I saw her eyes move across 200 acres of restored value, and I saw her recalculate the split in real time. Sloane got out next, 32 now, still moving like the world owed her a soft landing, and she swept toward me with open arms. "Kinsley, look at you, all rugged." She hugged me. I let her. My father came last, hung back, gave me a nod that tried to be apology and didn't have the spine for it. They went in to see Earl, and they performed concern beautifully for about 20 minutes. Then the questions started, gentle as picking a lock. How much land was it exactly? Was the business turning a profit? Had Dad updated any of his paperwork lately? What with his health? Sharon asked it all in the voice you use for the dying, and Earl, propped on his pillows, answered every question with the same 2 words. "Ask Kinsley." It drove her quietly insane. She'd come to assess an inheritance and kept being redirected to the daughter she'd discarded. At dinner, she tried a new angle. "We've all been so worried about you out here alone, sweetheart." Alone. As if I hadn't built a whole life she could see through the window. I just smiled and passed the potatoes and said I'd never felt less alone. And under the table, my hands in my lap, I felt how steady they were. No shake. No brace. For the first time in my life, sitting at a table with my family, I wasn't waiting for the floor to drop. They left after 2 days, having learned nothing concrete and assuming everything. Here's what they assumed: that the land was Earl's, that when he died it would pass through his will. 3 ways. The way my mother had already divided it in a chat. That I was a tenant with calluses, a caretaker who'd done them all a favor by raising the property value before the sale. What they didn't bother to learn, because they'd never once thought I was worth learning, is what Earl told me the night after they pulled out of the drive. He had me sit at the kitchen table, and he slid a manila folder across the wood. Inside was a deed. The land, the buildings, the water rights, all of it, transferred into my name. Recorded at the county courthouse, dated 3 years earlier. "I did it the year after that screenshot," he said. "Walked into the county office myself, signed it over, paid the fee. It's done. It's been done. You don't owe a sale to anybody." I stared at the county stamp and felt the floor of my whole life shift, not because of the money, because somebody had chosen me, on paper, permanently, where it couldn't be taken back by a softer voice or a fresher crisis. "Why didn't you tell me?" I asked. He almost smiled. "Because you needed to build it like it was already yours and earn it like it wasn't. Look what you did." Then he got serious. "Don't tell Sharon. Let her keep planning her split. The day she finds out it was never hers to split, she'll show you exactly who she is. And you'll be standing on solid ground when she does." I put the folder in the safe. I didn't say a word to anyone, and I went back to work on land that, it turned out, had been mine the whole time. Quick thing before the hard part. Notice that I never raised my voice once through any of this. That's not weakness. That's a woman who finally stopped auditioning for love. If that idea means something to you, leave a comment with one boundary you wish you'd set sooner. I read every one of them. Now, the hard part. As Earl's health slipped that spring, Sloane made her move, and it was straight out of the old playbook. She started calling Earl directly, sweet and tearful, with a brand new crisis. She was being evicted, she said. She had nowhere to go. Couldn't her dear grandfather help her? Maybe with a little something now? Maybe with a mention in his will? Just so she'd know she was loved before he passed. I only found out because Earl told me, shaking his head over his coffee. "Your sister thinks I'm dying stupid," he said. He'd told her no. Flat. The same word that had never been available to me as a child was, it turned out, perfectly available when an old man decided to use it. Sloane escalated. The calls came daily. Then Sharon joined in, framing it as family unity, suggesting Earl do right by all his grandchildren while he still could. They had no idea the deed was already recorded. They were lobbying for a vote in an election that was over. Earl let them keep at it, the way he'd told me to, gathering their whole hand. But it cost him. I'd watch him hang up the phone gray and tired, and I'd want to tear into them, and he'd just pat my hand and say, "Soon, Kinsley, let them write it all down." They were writing it all down, in texts, in voicemails, in a paper trail of greed they were too sure of themselves to hide. They thought they were closing in. They were only making my case. Earl went downhill over 6 weeks, the way strong men do, all at once after a long, stubborn plateau. I moved a bed into the front room so he could see the horses through the window. I cut my client load in half and learned to do the things you learn to do for someone you love who's leaving. I'm not going to dress it up or wring it out. It was hard and it was holy and it was mostly quiet. Tom came by most evenings, off the clock, and sat with us, and never once made it about himself. Casey took over the morning chores without being asked. The life I'd built, the one my family thought made me selfish for leaving them, turned out to be exactly the net that held us all up when it mattered. Earl mostly slept those last weeks, but he had good hours, and in one of them he asked me to help him out to the fence line one more time. I walked him slow, his arm thin through the flannel, out to the rail where the gloves hung on the post. He took them down, the cracked brown leather, his father's gloves, the ones he'd told me would fit when I'd earned them. He pressed them into my hands. "They fit now," he said. They did. Somewhere in 7 years of work, my hands had grown into them, and I'd never noticed the day it happened. We stood at the rail and watched June graze in the low gold light, the throwaway mare, sleek and sound and exactly where she belonged. Earl didn't say anything profound. He just squeezed my shoulder once and said, "Good work, kid." 3 words. The richest I've ever been handed. He passed in his sleep 9 days later with the window open and the horses calling at dawn. I buried my grandfather on a clear Saturday in the little cemetery behind the country church he'd gone to for 60 years, and half the county came. Boarders, neighbors, the vet, the feed store owner, ranchers he'd helped and never mentioned. The man my mother had written off as a failure had a line of trucks parked a quarter mile down the road. My family came too, of course. They wore black and dabbed their eyes and accepted condolences they hadn't earned, and I watched my mother work the crowd at her own father's funeral like it was a networking event. Sloane cried prettily and loudly, the way she did everything, and people who didn't know better comforted her. I stood at the graveside in my grandfather's gloves, dry-eyed, because I'd done my grieving in the front room over 6 honest weeks and had nothing performative left. After the burial, at the reception in the church hall, my mother found me by the coffee urn. She squeezed my arm and lowered her voice into the register she used for business. "We should all sit down soon, honey, about Dad's affairs, the land, the house. We'll need to settle it fairly, as a family." There it was, not even cold in the ground, as a family. The phrase that had only ever meant her plan, executed on schedule. I looked at her, this woman who had taught me I was strong so she'd never have to be soft with me, and I felt the last hook slip out of my mouth. "You're right," I said evenly. "Let's settle it. Come out to the ranch on Saturday. Bring whoever you need to." She smiled, mistaking my calm for compliance, the way she always had. "Wonderful. I'll bring the realtor." Of course she would. I just nodded and refilled my coffee. Saturday it was. She called twice that week to coordinate, and each call told me more about the plan she thought was hers. She'd already met with a realtor, a brisk woman named Paula, who specialized in agricultural acreage. She'd already gotten a rough valuation, sight unseen, based on what I'd told no one and she'd guessed from the road. 2 million, give or take, for the land and the operation as a going concern. She'd already decided the split. A third to her, a third to Sloane, a third to my father, which was really just a second third to her. And for me, the daughter who'd built every dollar of that going concern value, she'd prepared what she clearly thought was generous. "You can keep your personal horses, of course," she said on the phone, "and we'll make sure you get first option to rent the place from the new owners. Family helps family. Family helps family." I had to set the phone down and breathe, not from anger, from the sheer architectural beauty of her delusion. She'd canceled my birthday because I was the strong one who didn't need things. Now she was preparing to evict me from the life I'd built and framing it as a favor, and she could not conceive of a world in which it wasn't already hers to give away. "We can only show up for one of you," she'd told me at 25. At 34, she was about to learn the cost of a lifetime of that arithmetic. I said only, "See you Saturday, Mom." I didn't warn her. I didn't gloat. Earl had taught me better than that. You don't announce the reveal. You let people build the gallows themselves, in front of witnesses, and then you simply hand them the rope they brought. Saturday, my mother was bringing a realtor to sell my own land back to me. I let her. I spent that week deciding exactly how I wanted Saturday to go, because for once in my life I held all the cards and I wanted to play them with grace, not malice. I could have ambushed her at the front gate with the deed and a smirk. I didn't want that. I wanted the truth to land in daylight, in front of the people whose opinion she actually cared about, with no chance for her to revise it later into a story where she was the victim. So I made it a gathering. I called Earl's estate attorney, a soft-spoken man named Harlan who'd helped record the deed 3 years before, and I asked him to come Saturday and bring a certified copy. I invited a few of the boarders and neighbors who'd been at the funeral, framing it as a small memorial lunch for Earl out at the place he loved, which it also genuinely was. Tom would be there. Casey would be there. June would be in the near pasture, visible from the porch, the living proof of what this place had become. I wasn't building a trap. I was building a room where the truth couldn't be twisted because too many honest people would be standing in it. My weapon was never going to be volume or cruelty. My mother had spent 34 years wielding manipulation, lies, and the soft knife of who needs us more. I wasn't going to fight her with her own blade. I was going to fight her with a county stamp and a room full of witnesses. And I was going to do it without raising my voice one single time. That was the whole revenge. Not to hurt her. To simply, finally, be standing on ground she couldn't take, and let her break herself against the fact of it. Saturday came clear and bright. I put on Earl's gloves out of habit, then took them off and set them on the post, where he'd want them for this. They arrived at 11, and my mother had dressed for a closing. She came up the drive in heels that sank into the gravel, with Paula the realtor in tow carrying a leather folio, and Sloane and my father trailing behind. The memorial lunch was already underway on the wide porch and front lawn. Dell was there, and 3 other boarders, and 2 neighbors who'd known Earl 40 years, and Harlan the attorney in a quiet gray suit nobody had clocked as anything but a mourner. Tom stood by the steps. Casey leaned on the rail. June grazed 40 feet off in the near pasture, sleek and dark and impossible to miss. My mother surveyed it all with the satisfaction of a woman touring a property she's about to liquidate. She didn't come to grieve. She came to inventory. After a respectable 10 minutes of accepting sympathy, she clinked a fork against a glass, on my porch, at my grandfather's memorial, and called for everyone's attention like a hostess. "I just want to thank you all for loving my father," she began, warm and practiced. "This land meant everything to him. And I know he'd want it cared for properly now that he's gone." She let that settle. Then she delivered the line she'd driven 3 hours to say. "So our family has decided to sell the ranch, to good people who'll honor his legacy. Paula here will be handling it. And don't worry about Kinsley. She'll be well taken care of." She actually put a hand on Paula's shoulder, presenting the realtor like a gift. A murmur went through the porch, confused, because every person standing there knew exactly whose ranch this was, even if she didn't. I saw Dell's eyebrows climb. I saw a neighbor look at me. My mother mistook the silence for awe and pressed on, telling them about the valuation, the timeline, the fair 3-way split. I let her talk. I let her get all the way to the end of it. Every word in front of every witness. Then, when she finally turned to me with a benevolent smile and said, "Isn't that right, sweetheart?" I set down my coffee and stepped forward. "Actually, Mom," I said, and my voice came out level and clear and carried farther than I expected across that quiet lawn. "The ranch isn't yours to sell." She laughed, a small social laugh for the crowd. "Honey, this isn't the time. We'll do the paperwork privately." "We can do it right now," I said. "Harlan?" The man in the gray suit stepped forward, and I watched my mother's face register that the quiet mourner she'd ignored was holding a folio of his own. "I'm Harlan Pratt," he said. "I was Earl's attorney for 20 years. He opened the folder and held up a single page with a county seal stamped at the bottom in red. "This is a certified copy of the recorded deed for this property. Earl Sinclair transferred full ownership of the land, the buildings, and all water and mineral rights to Kinsley Sinclair." He paused. 3 years ago. It's been hers, free and clear, since then. There is nothing in the estate to sell. There is nothing to split." The silence that followed had a texture to it. Paula the realtor very slowly closed her leather folio. My father's mouth opened and shut. And my mother's face did something I had never once seen it do in 34 years. It cracked. The performance fell off it all at once, and underneath was something raw and ugly and, for just a second, almost frightened. "That's not possible," she said. "He was confused. He was sick. You manipulated a dying old man." "He recorded it 3 years ago," Harlan said mildly. "He drove to the county office himself. He was sharper than most men half his age." I looked at my mother and I did not feel the triumph I'd braced for. I felt something quieter and sadder. I felt the whole architecture of my childhood finally collapse in public, in daylight, with witnesses, exactly as I'd wanted, and there was no joy in it, only a clean and final closing. June lifted her head in the pasture at the rise in voices, then went back to grazing, unbothered. The throwaway mare on her unsellable land. I let the truth sit in the air a moment longer. Then I said the thing I'd waited 9 years to say, and I said it softly, because the soft ones land hardest. "You always said you could only show up for one of us. Grandpa showed up for me. On paper. Permanently. Try and cancel that." That's when they came apart. All 3 of them. Exactly the way Earl said they would once they saw they'd lost. My mother went first and went loud. "After everything I did for you," she shouted on my porch, in front of 40 years of my grandfather's friends. "I raised you. I fed you. This is how you repay this family? Stealing your sister's inheritance?" She was shaking, her finger out, her voice climbing into a register the neighbors had never heard from polished Sharon Sinclair. I just stood there. I didn't raise my voice to match hers. I'd learned, finally, that the calm one in a room full of shouting is the one everybody believes. Sloane went next, right on cue, switching from grief to a fresh crisis in under a breath. "I can't believe this," she wailed, pressing a hand to her chest. "I feel faint. I think I'm having an attack. Somebody." And for the first time in my life, nobody moved toward her. Not one person. The boarders looked away, embarrassed for her. The old reflex, the one that had canceled my whole childhood, found an empty room. And my father, my quiet father who'd kept the peace by sacrificing me at every turn, did the saddest thing of all. He stepped toward me, away from them, his eyes wet, and he said low, just for me, "I should have come to your birthday, Kinsley." For 1 second my heart moved. Then he glanced back at my mother, and the spine went out of him the way it always had, and he stepped right back to her side. Near, sympathetic, unchanged. He'd had 34 years and one funeral to choose me, and even now, knowing everything, he chose her in the space of a single backward glance. That told me more than any deed could. My mother kept shouting about lawyers and contesting and undue influence. Harlan, unbothered, said she was welcome to try, that the recording was airtight, and the witnesses many. And I stood in the middle of all of it, the strong one, finally getting to be strong on my own terms. And I felt nothing I needed to act on. I just waited for them to run out of noise. When the shouting finally guttered out, because shouting always does when nobody feeds it, I spoke once more, quietly, and the whole porch went still to hear it. "I'm not going to fight you in court," I said. "You'd lose, and it would cost you money you don't have. So here's what's going to happen. You're going to get in your car, and you're going to drive back the 3 hours you came, and you're not going to call this ranch again." My mother started to speak. I didn't let her. "For 34 years, I said. You told me I was the strong one, so you'd never have to give me anything. You canceled my birthday. You built a group chat to keep me out of my own family. You drove out here to sell the only home that ever wanted me, and you called it doing me a favor." I looked at the three of them, at the realtor, at the friends who'd loved my grandfather. "You taught me family is whoever shows up," I said. "None of you ever did. So I built one." Then I gestured, calm as anything, toward the long gravel drive. "The gate's this way." And I walked them to it myself, the whole length of the drive, past the new barn and the full stalls and the mare nobody had wanted, my boots steady on ground that was mine. I didn't slam anything. I didn't need to. I just opened the gate and stood beside it and waited. They left the way people leave when they've lost and can't admit it, with the engine too loud and the gravel kicking up, and not one of them looking back. Paula the realtor pulled out first, embarrassed, with a small apologetic nod in my direction that I appreciated more than she knew. Then my mother's spotless sedan, with Sloane already on her phone in the back seat hunting for the next available sympathy, and my father in the passenger seat staring straight ahead at a road that led back to the same small house and the same small life I'd finally escaped. I stood at the open gate and watched the car shrink down the drive and turn onto the county road and disappear into the heat shimmer. I didn't feel like crying. I didn't feel like cheering. I just felt the quiet come back. The good quiet. The kind I'd driven 3 hours and worked 9 years to earn. Behind me, June lifted her head and nickered, low, the way she did when she wanted me back at the rail. So I closed the gate, slid the bolt home, and turned around to walk back toward my life. There was lunch to finish. There were horses to feed. There was a whole afternoon of being free. That was a little over a year ago. My mother had a lawyer send one letter threatening to contest the deed. Harlan sent one back, and we never heard from him again. Sloane called once, 6 months later, not to apologize but to ask for money, the way water finds the same crack every time. I told her no, kindly, and I hung up, and I didn't feel a thing afterward except the mild surprise of how light a clean no can be. I haven't spoken to my parents since the gate. I don't expect to. Some doors you close so the rest of the house can finally get warm. The ranch is thriving. The waiting list is 14 names now. Casey's 20 and running her own training clients. And last month I handed her a brand new pair of work gloves, stiff and pale, and told her they'd fit when she'd earned them, and watched her not understand yet exactly what I meant. She will. Tom and I got married in the spring, out by the arena, with the boarders and the neighbors and the horses looking on over the rail. It was small and honest, and nobody fainted. June had her third foal in April, a leggy filly I'm keeping, because some lines you protect once you understand their worth. And Earl's gloves still hang on the post by the tack room. I wear them every morning, the cracked brown leather soft at the knuckles, his father's before him, mine now, and they fit me perfectly. They have for years. I just didn't notice the day it happened, the same way I didn't notice the exact day I stopped waiting for a phone call from people who were never going to make it. Here's the only thing I know for sure now. Blood made us relatives, but it never once made us family. And the day I stopped begging the first to act like the second was the day I finally had room in my life for the people who simply showed up. That's my story. One canceled birthday, 9 years of work, and a gate I finally got to close on my own terms. If someone in your life keeps calling you the strong one to excuse leaving you out, let tonight be the nudge you needed. You're allowed to go build a table of your own. Share this with whoever needs to hear it, drop a comment, and hit subscribe. I'll see you in the next one.